Hello, Pete. Are you are you happy and are you well?
Yeah, I'm both. I'm happy and I'm well.
Which is the
Are
opposite.
you having a hard day, mate?
I'm having the worst day ever, and I'm just thinking that to me, it's like one of the biggest interviews of my life, and I've just totally ballsed it up here already at the start. Right at the start, I've successfully managed to put you an hour behind time, and I don't even know what you charge by the hour as an engineer, but I'm sure it's more than what I can afford, and I just think.
Well, I can't afford me. That's the problem, you know. So.
Well, do you know what? Actually, do you know what it was? It was, I don't know. It was the hardware encoding, and I had to reset all the settings on OBS, and it just wouldn't allow the hardware. Ever since I've installed Catalina, it's bungled the system. You know, Mojave runs absolutely fine on the Mac, and I know you're a PC guy, and I found this thing on the floor, and it says, "Follow the footprints of the Lord. They'll lead you through troubled times and brighten your life." And I thought, yeah. I thought, you know what I mean? I need it right about now. So, right.
Well, you know, well, it's great to be with you. Let's get into it, shall we? See what happens. See if it all goes pear shaped or we get through somehow.
Superb. Thank you so much for your time. Apology. I've set the time back to actually to 1 p.m. from all the way from noon. Like I said, I didn't even sleep properly last night, just thinking about the interview. This is Radio Asian, the #1 station for the Asian invasion. Many people feel offended by the whole Asian invasion thing, but you have also played a major part regarding this whole the Asian invasion, the sonic Asian invasion. I'll come to that in a minute. Pete Ware, born in Ilford, which is down the road, where now people carry guns and full of brown people. We're in Dagenham,
I was I was born near Ilford in Barkingside, but in the 1950s, mind, and into a very safe old school English family. And if anything, the large number of people, aside from the people that I immediately knew, it's a very big Jewish area. There's a fantastic Jewish community been there for years now, and so many of my school friends were Jewish, and what great people, and sort of opened my eyes completely to what fantastic cultures. And you go around to play with somebody's lad and there'd be fantastic smells, and the parents were up and lively and shouting. It really opened my eyes, because I was brought up in a very safe but slightly straightforward, staid white English household. So I suppose that was the first step on a route to our modern world, which I completely embrace and enjoy every minute of and every culture of.
Brilliant. By the way, for the listeners or the people watching, people carry guns in Dagenham as well. It's not just Ilford, but
yeah, and not just guns. You can have your weapon of choice. We don't want to advertise any particular type of malevolent weapon.
I'm loving it. I've been in London now for over 10 years, and when I first got here, everyone used to ask, "Are you from Ilford?" And I just couldn't make the connection. Then one day, when I realised that all the brown people just got off the train at Ilford, and I was the only brown face in the carriage, I was like, what's going on?
Well, I haven't been back to Ilford for many years, but the last time I was there, it looked pretty thriving to me. So, it was a great place for me to start. But having said that, I've travelled a good bit over the last many years, been in a lot of places and fetched up lots of different things and lots of different areas, different cultural areas, musical areas. So it's just, each step is a step on a path.
Brilliant. You describe yourself as an English-born keyboard player, engineer, music producer with a full knowledge of computers and modern recording systems, acoustics and techniques. You own recording studio facilities in the UK, Shropshire, how beautiful, and Spain, Andalusia. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, Andalusia, yeah.
Beautiful. You speak Spanish reasonably well, though not fluently. Mixing and mastering's become a speciality over recent years. Yeah, you're a don, and you write string arrangements and have session musicians available at short notice. Now, how the hell do you manage to have session musicians available at short notice?
Well, like you, I have my general group of musos that I tend to turn to in many different fields, many different genres, and I feed them quite a lot of work. So as a result of that, I can pick up the phone to a pedal steel player in Ireland or in Nashville or I know one in Devon, I know another one in Scotland, I know one in Birmingham, and go, can you do me a session this afternoon? And the chances are that one of them will go, yeah, bring it on. I'm not doing much else. So I genuinely can get stuff done pretty quick. And it's all based on a kind of a money go round and mutual respect. I give them plenty of work and they know that sometimes you're on a time constraint and they'll go, I'll have it back to you tomorrow. Is this urgent? Can I leave it a few days? I've got other stuff on. However it works. But for the most part, yeah, I can turn stuff around pretty quick.
Wow.
It's the internet, isn't it? This whole broadband internet, instant communication thing has changed the world. It used to take me 10 days to get a bit of electronics when I was a teenager. You'd have to write the check, put it in the post, wait for it to clear at the other end, and then eventually 10 days or a fortnight later, something would turn up in a brown parcel. You didn't have any of this order it in the morning, receive it in the afternoon nonsense from Amazon or the other retailers of your choice.
But that then leads me to another question, actually. Many people have had to rely on technology because of lockdowns and recording. Now, how has lockdowns affected you? Has it been beneficial to your creativity, having more time? Well, then you're always in the studio anyway, aren't you? So,
yeah. For those of you out there who aren't music producers, we're a lonely breed. We rarely meet each other. We rarely go out the house. We quite often don't go to bed. And as a result, lockdown doesn't mean a great deal, provided you've got enough workflow. And in my situation, yes, I did have enough workflow because a lot of the live musicians that I work with realised quite early on that they weren't going to work for the next year and decided to build a set of singles to release every few months. So I've actually been quite busy throughout lockdown and extremely grateful for it, and very sorry for all of those people who rely entirely on their live performances, for whom it's been disastrous.
That's a very, very valid point. Now, with things opening back up, then again, to be honest, right? Look, in the UK, they're building 200 brand new job centres, right? Not even kidding. 13 brand new tax offices, right, for people which took all the loans and defaulted and took the loan and quickly jumped, I don't know, partied it away or snorted it away. And I actually see doom and gloom financially, economically. I know this is not the economic show. This is Radiation. Is talking about music and that, but then that's going to have a knock-on effect on overall budgets for projects and the rest of that. So, has it affected your bottom line over lockdown?
The music side hasn't been massively affected. It has been partly affected, and as I am part of the system, I have had a bit of help from the government, for which again I'm grateful. I have a sideline which I don't do for the money, really. I do for the joy of it. We can come to the content of that later, but that involves a kind of live performance, and that completely stopped. So I lost quite a money during the course of COVID from that point of view. It's not actually musical, but it is a situation in which I have to, essentially, I don't quite get up on a stage, but I rig up a headset with a PA and go through. It's a kind of a talk and kind of a lot of fun as well. But we haven't been able to do it for the last, nearly 18 months now. So I've lost money and lost ground from that point of view. More importantly, I guess, I've lost that fun element because I enjoy going out and doing those things. But for me, yes, fortunately, the music side, the studio side, has been pretty stable. Pretty good.
Brilliant. Just 1 second. Let me switch these transformers to... that's more like it. Sorry. That should be a cleaner... Actually, who am I kidding, man? The audio signal's better than... worse, dirtier than the missus's mind, but it's fine.
Exactly what kind of interview is this?
Anything goes. It's just an interview conducted by a corrupt, warped presenter who manages to damage studio equipment. So.
No problem. Anyway, getting back to the music before we completely derail this, I think maybe I should take over. And where exactly did you grow up there then, Dav?
I'm still growing. I got to stop eating the cake, for God's sake.
Ah, right, okay.
I'm only messing. But what it is, Terminator 1, right, is one of my most favourite films, right? So, do you have any favourite films and why?
Oh, crikey. Favourite films. I'm not a film buff, but I love films. I love sci-fi films, practically any kind of film. Whether do I have a favourite? It would be pretty boring, fairly easily guessed favourite. I love The Shawshank Redemption, if you've ever seen it. It's a great film. And another Stephen King, The Green Mile. Most unusual film you might have as a favourite because it takes place on death row, but it's an amazing film and a great story, and the acting in it is sublime. And so I like films of that nature, and I like films that challenge. I watched is it called The Golden Compass or something like that? No, that doesn't sound quite right.
Yeah,
Tom Hanks film, and it takes place across lots of different periods of time in lots of different locations, and people playing different characters all the time. I forgot what it's called now for a minute, but absolutely amazing film. I've watched it twice and haven't understood a third of it yet. So I like films that challenge me anyway. You can keep The Mummy. I'm not into that, but I like films that have a little bit of intellect behind them.
Brilliant. Because it all. See, the reason why I asked about why I raised Terminator as a film, because it's common knowledge, right? If you want to see soulless robots first thing in the morning, all you got to do is ride the Central Line into London, right?
Yeah.
and it's true.
Oh boy, I did that for many years. That's very naughty. I do have a connection with robots, though I wouldn't call them soulless. In that our son is a very big robots war adherent, Robot Wars. And we've actually been on 3 of the television series fighting robots. So I wouldn't call those robots soulless. I'd call them sharp and very heavy at times, but not exactly soulless. Oh, and I think did I send you a picture of me shaking hands with a Dalek? I might have done that. I suppose you could call that sort of a cyber robot, couldn't you?
You're right. So the thing is, so you're involved in the construction of these robots, and what challenges have you had in building these robots?
Keeping up with my son would be a good start, because he's a really excellent engineer, and I'm a pretty good bodger, but I'm a bodger. He's a proper engineer. So yes, keeping up with his learning curve from the age of 15 to he's now 25, and is in a hugely successful situation, actually building robots of a different nature and various robotic things. So keeping up with him, and we do the live circuit of people fighting robots in various leisure centres around the country. Sometimes we can be found there. And once now lockdown finishes and we're able to get back to that, we do that. And now let's roll back to the thing that I've lost during COVID, is that I work with the firm that built the house robots for Robot Wars.
Wow. And
one of the things I do is myself and another guy who's involved, Trev, we go out with a small version of this to corporate events, to hotels, and we put up an arena, and we put up a PA, and we take kit robots, and we have groups of people, and first we show them how to build the robots, then we allow them to customize the robots, decorate the robots, name the robots, and then we put them all in the arena, and they kick 7 kinds of shit out of each other, and everybody gets very screamy. And that's the thing that I miss so much from the last year or two, because as you can imagine, the afternoons, which start out quite serious, end in complete pandemonium, which is fantastic fun.
Are there any rules or such as limitations as to how deadly you can make this robot?
Yeah, well, obviously, when you're doing robots in a hotel reception room for an afternoon, you can't have fast, whizzy, spinny things going on. There are very strict rules and protocols and different weight classes of robots, and they go from little tiny things you could hold in one palm to the heavyweights, which we quite often fight, and they weigh 110 kilos. So if you can't quite imagine that, anybody who's listening, imagine a medium-size moped, that sort of weight, or motorbike. They're just about, two grown men could just about pick one up, to give you an idea. And you could put them in a car, but your car's suspension would be sagging. So they're that size, and they're just heavy to move around, but great fun.
Wow. It's amazing. Like, if you look at the other end of it in terms of weaponry and DARPA and the actual robots they got on the killing field, you know what I mean, and for war. I mean, have you seen the footage of some of these robots?
I have.
Scary, isn't it?
I have, yeah, but I like to think of the brighter side too. That, I mean, there are robots beginning to get strongly involved in farming, for example, agriculture, because it's far better for a robot to go around and zap a weed than have a human do it, because that's soulless work. It's the sort of thing a soulless robot can do really well, but if human beings, is not very fair to them, is it? So I'd like to focus more on the positives of robotics than the negatives. But yeah, you're right. Some of the DARPA stuff is very clever and quite scary.
It is.
But remember this. Sorry to talk across, but remember this. The Daleks used to freak me out as a kid. But I'm sure you've thought about this. You run upstairs. What are they going to do?
Exactly. You're right.
So they're not all that sharp, are they? You know.
But another thing which is very interesting is a positive is the use of robots in France to defuse bombs.
Absolutely, anything like that. Firefighting, when police need to get down a street where maybe there's a gunman or somebody in real trouble, or down in mines or undersea. You've got the skills of robotics and robotic design in all of those things. And look at Mars right now, for example, and now announcements for Venus as well. The whole robotics revolution is going to be a very positive thing for the most part. It's not about getting a robot around your house using a bucket and to clean your kitchen floor. It's all about the extreme edges, isn't it? And that's why it's exciting.
Absolutely superb. We've got a message coming in saying Robot Wars, the classic from Jazz LDN, is a brilliant artist and is brilliant over here in East London, kicking butt. I was going to say one more thing, but it's a bit occult, but forget it, may as well come out with it. You know, from the 50s, they've been experimenting. There was an old experiment done where they implanted a chip into a bull's head, and he ran towards the matador, and he did something with his hand, and the bull just stopped in his tracks before it hit the guy. Now,
right, okay.
Yes, Musk has been, involved in this sort of stuff as well, but as was Epstein. He was involved in chips and putting chips in heads. Now I'm deviating and taking this, all over the corner shop now. But
that's all right.
But I thought I'd hit you with something, another weird and wonderful angle. So I do a lot of reading over here.
A little too much, I would suggest.
Certainly. Yeah, it's true. Right. If you could build your own robotic assistant studio engineer, right?
Okay.
What attributes would it have, and what would he call it?
I don't know what I'd call it. I know what it would do. That would be pretty straightforward. It would follow me around, picking up pencils, screwdrivers, and tools, and anything that I pick up, use, put down, and then manage to somehow vanish. I'm sure that this happens to lots of people. You go, yeah, I'm just going to do that. And then you come back to it, and it's not there, and it's not there, and it's not there, and it seems to have literally vanished. I would have a robot going around with a camera or a notepad, and all the time it would go, okay, he's put the biro just behind that key. It's going to disappear behind that keyboard in a minute. And so when I go, where is my pen? He'd go, here, boss, here's your pen. Or, here, boss, here's your pen. And return it to me. So I think I'd probably call it for God's sake, because that's the way I would start the sentence. For God's sake, where is my pen? And it would go, hello, here's your pen. Oh, thank you. So that would be the nature of a robot in my recording studio for sure.
Absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. I love it. I love it. So could you please give me a breakdown of the day in the life of an engineering producer from the moment you wake up?
Okay. From the moment I wake up, I get texts from somebody called Dav, who's hoping that we're going to have this interview today. Sporadically, this goes through the morning, and then finally we get on air and we talk a load of bollocks. So or other kind of gonads, you know, whatever. Yeah. So no, a proper day. As most studios nowadays, I have my studio at home. I don't need to travel, so I would do all the normal things that human beings do when they get up. You know, scratch and itch, and I try and lay out my day a bit. I have a book. In fact, my book is right here. I have my book, and on each day, give or take, I will write out the list of things I'm hoping to do, and I might even put a number to prioritize those things, and then I work from the top of this down or through, going from priority 1 to priority 7 or whatever it is. So I try and run my musical day pretty efficiently, and you have to do that because time is money, and losing your place is so easy to do. So I do have a book, because you know yourself, if you wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night and you've got 20 things to do the following day, they keep you awake. All I've got is I know I've got 20 things to do, but because I wrote the list out last night, I go, as soon as I start to worry about this, I refer to my list. I only have to remember one thing: look at book. And then, because I just look at book, then I can sleep better knowing that, okay, I'm now at my studio desk. It might be 10 in the morning. I'll go, here's my book. Right, what did I decide was my highest priority? Okay, blah, 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 blah. Anything really high priority coming from the internet? Okay, well, I'll deal with that, this. And then I'll take a break for a bit, and then I'll come back to that. And I try to get to the end of each day with as many ticks as I can. Super. Because it keeps the flow through all the time, you know. And if you've got jobs, you can't hold record companies up. When they need something, they need it. When you're doing sessions with people, quite often these things are really important to them. So you can't forget things. You can't put things on hold. And they go, well, 6 weeks later, what's happened to my mix? You've got to be in communication with people. So all the time I'm trying to rationalize my way through. And in a slightly mad aside, I think of this as toothpaste. And this is where, if you've got a lot of toothpaste and you want to get it to come out sort of an even thickness, if you've got a lot of toothpaste, then you press a little bit less hard. And if you haven't got much toothpaste, you squeeze a bit harder. The idea being is that you know, a business life is more successful when you can keep that toothpaste flow really neat. So I try and have enough to do each day, but not be overpowered, and not too little to do in any one day, because just like any other creative, I get really nervous if I'm not working for an afternoon. So I try and create a steady squeeze of that toothpaste into regular work all the time. And that's essentially the shape of my day, and then rinse and repeat the next day.
Wow. So that kind of answers the next question, which would have been, how do you handle stress and working to deadlines? I think it's the book which handles it all, isn't it?
Yeah, as long as I've got it in the book and I've written it down correctly, then that takes quite a lot of the stress. But yeah, I feel the stress just like anybody else. And let me tell you, for anybody who's just starting out as an engineer and producer, don't think for 1 minute it gets any less. Because although I've been doing this for a long time, I still stress over deadlines. I stress more when somebody isn't happy with something I've done, which inevitably happens sometimes. That really cuts. I had one last week where I sent what I thought was a really good finish mix to somebody, expected them to come back with a, you know what, it's great. Oh, I love it. Maybe we could just promote that guitar at a dB at the end of it, or something like that. And I got this message back saying, "I've received your mix. We need to talk." That sort of thing. And I'm really not feeling this. The so and so, such and such, can't hear that, and this is so and so and so on. And that, from my point of view, was devastating. Until an hour later, he phoned me up and he said, "I've just bought new headphones. I hadn't realised that my headphones had broken. Having heard the mix with new headphones, it's bloody fantastic." But for that hour, I just want the world to open up. I dread it when that occasionally happens, and it does happen inevitably. If you put it another way, you have to be quite arrogant to be a music producer. You have to have strong opinions, and quite often you feel you know the best thing for somebody, but that may not chime with what they think is the best thing for them, and that can get really complicated sometimes. So I try, and when that happens, I try as gently as I can to stop it before it gets into a real mess. While I'm saying this, I get people who say, "Oh, Pete," in the Bhangra world, for example, "Oh, Pete G, you've done this all your life. You know exactly what. We want you to mix it your style. Just mix it. It's going to be great." And they send me this thing, and I mix it, and they go, "Yeah, but we need a bit more top on the vocals, Panjabi style, and the vocals louder, bass, less bass, don't want the bass, and we really want to push the dolki, really push the dolak, the tablas, tumbi's got to be really loud, tumbi and the pieces really loud, and do we really need the drums?" And I had to say, what's going on? You don't like the way I mix it? And they go, "Oh, well, we've tried mixing this 5 times ourselves, me and my crew, over the last 6 months, and we've never got a mix we've liked."
Right.
And I pause and I go, "But you're trying to tell me how I should be mixing it, whilst admitting that you haven't been able to do it. So let's unravel that." But sometimes it comes out great. Eventually you end up with such a twisted mix, and you go, "Okay, I know the vocal's crazy loud. It's as tinny as can be. There's no bass on it. The drums have gone. The tumbi is stupidly loud. Everything else has disappeared." And they go, "Oh, great, gee, thank you." Then they go to their mates, and of course I hear on the news, "He's not all that great, that guy, that Pete Ware. He's not all he's cracked up to be." And they go away. Well, this happens. And then 4 months later, this has happened to me a few times. 4 months later, they go, "Oh, PG, we've got something for you to mix." And I go, "Well, last time didn't really work out too great." And they go, "Yeah, but we went back to the first mix you did, and it was perfect." And you go, oh, please, kill me now. And they go, it was a really good mix, like they've just discovered it. And it's because, of course, everybody has their own feeling and fantasy about how their music wants to come out of the speakers. Yeah. And they don't want to hear it any other way. And I understand the psychology, but it gets very frustrating. So I tend to get a bit mouthy with it sometimes.
No, it's fine. So would you say that a major part of that is knowing your room, like how your mix is going to translate to other environments?
Well, certainly, yes, absolutely. Your mixing environment, your acoustics are important. But I think equally important is not getting caught in the "I'm the singer, I've got to have my vocal louder than anybody else," or "I'm the drummer, I need to hear my drums" approach, which is how so many artists get into trouble, particularly singers. And this is not just in the Bhangra world, this is across the board. Singers are accustomed to hearing their voices either through the bone structure of their skull, or on a PA system. And so they hear themselves in relation to the music around them hugely loud. So when they hear themselves coming out of speakers where they're not hugely loud, they feel, because they tend to be quite egocentric, that you're trying to cheat them, of their vocal dominance. And unwrapping that psychology can get quite complicated sometimes.
Wow.
I mean, you must have come across this. Have you had similar situations?
Man, I'm a joker smoker compared to you, Pete. Man. Let's just be honest. I'm an amateur. I had all these big dreams of working in mixing and all the rest of that. No, I have trained and all the rest of that. But radio, unfortunately, well, actually, fortunately, dominates my life, and literally everything is literally radio. So, but I
couldn't
try.
do what you do. I absolutely couldn't do what you do. The deadlines would be quite
Trust me.
difficult, and when the gear goes a bit off and stuff. I'm sure you know a bit about that.
You're funny. You're fun. For the purposes of the tape, everyone, right? I was meant to be live for noon, right, with Pete, and he's sat there, you know, for an hour, just thinking, why have I let this fat brown guy into my life?
Well, for purposes of the tape, can I also mention that I love a running gag?
Yeah. Brilliant.
I love a running gag, and if I see somebody as great as Dav, it is fun to wind them up a bit, you know.
Thank you. Do you know what it was? I was thinking, I'm in the studio, I'm in danger of losing weight here, I'm sweating, I'm under stress, and I thought, this is like one of the biggest interviews of my life, and I've ballsed it up, and I thought, this guy must be thinking I'm a complete, you know, idiot. Yeah, I'm just thinking I've got to fix it. But I think one of the traits, right, of being a good engineer is to manage stuff and fix stuff when it goes wrong.
Deal with it in the moment if you can. You did actually send a couple of questions we were going to do this a couple of weeks ago, weren't we? You did send a couple of questions, and I think one of the questions said something along the lines of, what's your secret weapon in the studio? Something like that.
Yeah. But don't disclose it.
Well, I think I can, because I don't think it's going to make any difference. If you haven't got what it takes, you haven't got it. But my secret weapon in the studio is humour. And
Brilliant.
It gets rid of stress. It creates natural pause points where 30, 40 years ago everybody would have poured outside and had a fag. It gives you that natural chance to breathe. And there's a bit of psychology in that too. How can you expect anybody to enjoy the music or the art that you make if you don't enjoy making it? So that's a really big thing for me. I try and have fun and enjoy and be in the moment with all the kinds of music that I deal with, and they're vast and wide, and squeeze every bit of fun that I can. Obviously, the job's got to get done at the end of the day, but I'm always looking for the funny side of it, because that's what gets you through at the end of the day. It gets you past the stress when you can laugh it off.
Oh, man. And, well, thank you, because, you know, that also applies from yourself to me today as to what happened. But the thing is, I think we also have our perks to the jobs. I think one of the perks to my jobs is having great interviews, hearing music first from great artists, supporting artists from when they're starting out, and watching them grow. So what would you say are the perks of your job? If
you're well enough organised and you've got your toothpaste going at the right sort of pace, you can cut it off and go away for a few days, and your business doesn't collapse. So I like to do that. In fact, I've got a little bit of a tan myself, because I've been out in the sun the last few days.
Myself, I love it.
Because I've been out in the sun for a few days. So largely being your own boss is just brilliant. And I didn't even learn I wasn't confident, Dav, in myself until relatively late on in my career to be my own boss. I always sought partnerships, the support of somebody helping you and being with you. And I had some great partnerships, I should say, as well. But from late 90s onwards, I decided that I was going to be captain of my own ship and not have anybody else that I was responsible for or had to share the decisions with. And I would say that once you get to that level where you can do that, then take that and also trying to work to live, not live to work. Once you can achieve all those balances, and it's not easy, then of course it's probably one of the most wonderful jobs on earth, isn't it? It's got to be.
Wow. Great answer as well. A great answer. Right. So, do you have any musicians in the family? Any musical geniuses?
No. My mum used to play the the organ in church as a girl, I believe. My dad could kind of play the piano. He could read music and play. My brother's quite a good sight reader. He wouldn't have that creative thing where he could play from his own mind, but he could read music really quite well. But I was never very satisfied with reading music. I wanted to be inventive, and as a young teenager, I spent a lot of time at the piano figuring out harmony, figuring out how things worked, figuring out endlessly. It must have driven my parents mad.
Yes.
Picking a tune, playing it on the piano with a bit of accompaniment, and then going, well, yeah, but what if I started here instead? So I'm not starting on that white note, I'm starting on this black note over here. Move the whole thing to a different area. Okay, now I've got to try and figure out the tune in that key. And so over a period of years, I became adept at being able to hear music and play it. So if you play a tune on the radio, I could go, okay, they're playing da-da-da-da-da-da and all this. Oh, and the chords underneath must be A minor, D minor, C7, whatever it might be. And so I went a different way. I'm not actually a very good reader of music, but I can hear music and I can envisage it on a piano, and then I can go to the piano and play it. And it wasn't automatic and built into me, but I've spent so much time doing that it's become almost as automatic as, I don't know, treading water or riding a bicycle, you know.
Wow. And so was this before or after you ended up working in the, was it the music shop demonstrating stuff?
This was before by the time I got to that, that's just after I left school and I was looking for my first jobs. By then, one of the things that I was able to do was listen to all the Christmas carols and play them. So they used to get me out on the, just coming up to Christmas, they'd take one of these organs with the two keyboards and the bass pedals and the...
Wow.
And I would sit out in the mall playing the keyboards, you know, to get people into the shop. And of course I could do, you know, Frosty the Snowman or, you know, Santa Claus is coming to town, whatever it was about at the time. And I could busk my way through those. So I was handy to them for that. And I should add also that I was terribly shy as a boy, terribly shy. Couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't look anybody in the eye. But working in that music shop and being forced in my horrible little double-breasted pinstripe brown suit with the flares, which was, can you imagine, long hair down past my shoulders, not particularly confident, and a very shy teenager playing an organ in a busy shopping centre was a baptism by fire. So it really taught me to be able to link to people. And of course, from that, I was able to sell organs and keyboards off the back of it.
Wow. In school, you're, am I correct, were you good at physics? And what was the other subject?
Oh, it began with M, didn't it?
Mathematics.
Music. I knew it was one of them.
Mathematics.
It certainly wasn't maths. The school thing was weird. You've got to cast your mind back to the way people looked at people in the 1960s and 70s. The only subjects I was any good at was physics and music. And my teachers were despairing of me. They're saying, well, you can't have a career with physics and music. That's ridiculous. It's like having, I don't know, sculpture and chemistry. The two just don't fit together, you know. And indeed, there were no university courses. Well, there was one just starting up called the Tonmeister in Guildford. Yes. There were no university courses for somebody like me. And I was made to feel I was a bit of a failure. I don't think that anybody meant badly, but I don't think they were well equipped to deal with somebody who had the ability to understand the physical world and the music thing. And for many years that I struggled to get past that. And then years later, I realized that it comes down to a very simple thing. In lots of people's minds, they fell into a trap of the arts and the sciences. And it was maths and physics and chemistry and biology and geography and history and whatever, and then that sort of got grouped together into humanities, didn't it, later on? And I never could understand this, but I understand the form of the world and I understood the form of the music. Yes. But I just saw the structure of the music as just being like the frame of a bridge. I didn't have any problem between the two. So if you think of a bridge as form and function, its function is to move, people or vehicles or trains from one place to another, and the form is how it's held up. The music is to transform an idea from one person to another telepathically, and the harmony is the way it's held up. So in my mind, there is no split between the arts and the sciences. It's just form and function. So form would be art and sculpture and drama. Yeah. Function would be harmony and the layout and perspective and those sort of elements. I really don't have that barrier between the two. So then, being reasonably adept at music and fascinated by technology, there's me as a young man, and then the electronic music revolution happened. And then suddenly, far from being a fish out of water, I was in demand because somebody could say to me, I want you to program an A minor 9 chord with a throbbing quaver beat on the bottom.
Yes.
And I'd have to go to some very ancient computer or sequencer and figure that out. So again, the form and function, with not having that barrier, it wasn't a problem to me. I just didn't have that. Oh, I can't do that because I'm an artist, or I can program it, mate, but I don't know what it sounds like. I was lucky that I had those two skills, and then that, of course, led to many other things.
I put it to you, Mr. Ware, that you're a genius. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah, right.
No. Hear me out, because what you're doing, you have the two hemispheres of the brain. You have the one which does logic, and you have the other one which does creativity, but you've bridged them. And that's why. And when they both work in synchronicity and in unison, that's powerful.
I genuinely don't have that wall between the two. The two are clearly linked to me. More than linked. I don't think of them as arts and sciences. I think of them as form and function. Yes. The way it works and what it does. And possibly in education, if more people thought that, then we would be allowing our children to grow into adults with more diverse mindsets. Whereas at the moment, it's getting better, but there seems to be the insistence that we all need to know about maths, for example. Yeah, we need to be able to add up in our minds, and we need to understand figures, but that's kind of ready reckoning. That should be taught at 5. But I don't think you need to teach millions and millions and millions of people to calculate the area underneath the curve. I just don't see the importance of that. If you want to study maths or statistics or any of that stuff, by all means, be my guest, but do it as a specialist subject, just like learning Russian. I don't think that we are serving our kids well by forcing them to do those upper ends of maths, when they would have been much better off learning other languages, for example, because their brains are adapted for it.
Very good point there regarding brains being adapted towards something, which then could also lead to like a natural inclination to do something as well, which is important. Like my weakness throughout my life was my mathematics, but now I've made it my strength. And as a result of making it a strength, we have done some rather nutty experiments where when I'm not in the studio doing stuff, I'm literally building pyramids. And
right.
Yeah, I know it sounds nuts, but we're building pyramids. That's put me in touch with a whole different circle of people which are also into pyramids. But I happen to measure. I stuck this one electrical meter within the pyramid, and it's registering electrical charge within the pyramid. And right, you're gonna get in trouble if you better pull that video off YouTube, else you're gonna get in trouble. And so from there, we use the knowledge to rebuild Wilhelm Reich's orgone accumulator to do stuff like that. So when I'm not doing all this sort of stuff, the audio, I'm literally doing these, for lack of a better...
Nikola Tesla will be a big guy in your world then.
Oh, of course, there's many, but studying the old scriptures in Sanskrit has been a great source. But anyway, it's not about me, because it's all about you, the Don. So right, how did you end up working with the bumpers? And what was your role?
Okay, so the Bumpers were an early band of mine, and that follows neatly on from when I was working in the music shop that Christmas, because the Christmas job ceased at the end of January, whenever it was. This would be 1976. Spring of 1976. Yes, that's right. And the other demonstrator in the music shop, who was old, he was 21, was working this day with me, and this group of lads came into the shop, and they went over to him and they chatted for a few minutes, and then I heard raised voices. And I thought, that's really strange. I don't know what all that's about. And anyway, then they came over to me. I thought, what on earth is going on here? And they said, look, we've just been over. We're a band. And I'd been in a couple of school bands. I said, okay, you're a band. I said, and we've, what's his, I can't remember his name now. He's our keyboard player. And we've just got a gig to go abroad for 6 weeks, to go literally touring abroad in Scandinavia. We've just come to him, and he said he doesn't want to go because his girlfriend won't let him. All right, so
that's my life.
As I sit here, this is the absolute truth. He can't go because his girlfriend won't let him. So they said, we noticed you playing the organ over there. Would you like to join a band? So I said, well, I've not really. I have played a bit in bands, but I don't really know much about it. They said, we've heard you play. We know you're all right. Why don't you come down and try it out? So we went down to a rehearsal room and batted it about for a bit. And they said, well, we think it's great. If you're happy, will you do it? And knowing that my job was folding up, I said, yeah, absolutely. Bear in mind, at this point, I was still 18. I hadn't yet turned 19. I would have been 18. I'd got a driving license, and I had no job, and this was paid. All right, not a lot of money, but it was paid. And they said, when we've finished our 6 weeks abroad, we've got gigs, local gigs, 2 or 3 nights a week at least, if not 4, So I joined them, and we started out, we had lots of names, but we settled eventually on the Bumpers. Yeah. And so we became a band, and the band did a number of, looking in hindsight, some great things. Yeah. We firstly, drummer's father had a car workshop on the East India Docks, and he had a spare building alongside. It wasn't very big. So we thought, oh, crikey, if we're going to be touring all the time, we really need to push ourselves. So we need somewhere to rehearse. So we cleared it all out, put in a PA, loudspeakers, and we started to rehearse. And but then we were doing our gigs. And then a number of local other bands said, could we use your rehearsal room? So we said, yeah, okay, £1 an hour, whatever it was at the time. And make sure you put the tea bags in the bin. And so we started to hire it out. And this became a bit of a business. So then we said, well, we need to record demos and things. I know I've sent you a picture of a bit after this period, but so could we get hold of a basic recording studio package? So we did that. It was expensive and we had some help, but we did that. Yes. And we created Bumper Sound Studios. Then, of course, we didn't have anywhere to rehearse, did we? So we took the toilet block, which was just across the way. We tore all the old urinals out of that, put a PA in, and made that the rehearsal room. And then we found we could hire them both out, and then we'd have somebody rehearsing over here, and then we'd have the studio working over here.
Wow! But
then, of course, people are saying, we've been rehearsing in your place for weeks. Can we record a demo? And a business is born, And then somebody has to engineer that and has to know how to put the gear together. And because I had this whole physics music thing going on, and I loved fixing stuff, I was able to fix the plug boards when they would go wrong. I was able to clean the tapes. I taught myself to line up tape machines, which as we got to bigger studios was really important.
Yes.
I actually rewired the whole of our first desk, the Allen and Heath desk, completely because it was such a mess. Took every cable out of it, rewired the whole thing. And so that was a good baptism into it. And so I became a studio engineer. Simultaneously. So your original question was the Bumpers. The Bumpers were still gigging, and we gigged for a long, long time in various guises. And we got on television. importantly, we got picked up by some of the big London studios as a band who wanted session bands. They'd got singers, but of course this was before the time any kind of programming happened. This was, if you wanted a drummer, you had to have a drummer.
Yeah,
that was great. So they said, hey, listen, your band, would you come in and record for an artist that we've got in the studio? And this would be big studios, the top flight studios in London, and we'd be hired on a day-by-day basis to be the studio band.
Yes.
And so we started session work, and we were pretty good. We sang harmonies, we knew all the instruments, and of course I was then in these enormous studios with top flight engineers, and I was able to watch and learn and see the very first synths that were coming out, because people had hired an ARP Odyssey for the day, and it was still there when our session came in. You go, oh, you know, and for me, this would be 1978 or something like that, 80 at the latest. It was another huge step for me, and I became fascinated, completely fascinated with studio stuff. I became fascinated with arrangement. I loved the synths, I loved the engineering, and it was just like a boy in a sweetie shop. I was just gone. For years, I was in a kind of a learn everything I could focus on muse for years, picking up the tools of the trade, you know.
Pete, how were you programming these synths?
Okay, I don't want to get too technical here because people who aren't technical won't get it, but if you've looked at any kind of keyboards from about 85 onwards, a bit later perhaps, you'll notice that there's a little socket on the back, two little sockets and sometimes three. And you'll know this. Yeah. And they will have the word MIDI written on them. Yeah. Yeah. And MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Yeah. And it was a way of connecting all of these new fantastic synthesizers together. But that was relatively late on. When I started, that didn't exist. Wow. So when you wanted to connect two bits of kit together, maybe it was a sequencer and a sampler. We didn't have any electronic recording then, of course. You wired them together, but you used voltages to connect them. You'll know this if you're into your electronics. So we used a system which was called CV gate back at the time, and the gate was a simple pulse, and the voltage went up. It said start playing a note, any note. When the voltage pulse goes down, stop playing it. So from there, you know when it starts, how long it lasts, and when it stops. That's your gate. And then the control voltage side, by changing the voltage, would tell you what note to play. So if I sent instruction, play a note, low C for one quaver, and then stop, and then play a note, high C for one quaver and stop, then it would go ba, ba. That's the beginning of your sequencing, isn't it? Wow. And control voltage, CV, you used to have to tune them in to stretch the octaves to fit the right scale, and it was all very messy, but when you got it working, it was great. And then suddenly your synthesizers would start to talk to each other, and so I got into programming in a heavy way, and I went out as a professional programmer with the PPG Wave and the very first samplers way back. The only other sampler that could do things like that at that time was the Fairlight, and these things were, the Fairlight was £26,000, you know. But I was into the PPG Wave, and I went out as a programming specialist with those. This would be 86 or something. So
you will know. You just explained how to use this bloody
thing.
I've
got one. It's in Spain, but I have one. Yes, yeah, I have one. Exactly that. Yeah, and this MIDI to CV, and that would actually convert a MIDI out. That was a little bit later, because then we had these Atari computers. Do you remember? 520 FMs and 1040 STs and whatever it is.
Yes.
And they had a MIDI socket on them because keyboards had it. But some of the synthesizers, my old Minimoog, for example, didn't have it. They only had the control voltage and gate. So I needed one of those boxes to make my new MIDI programming system work with the old synthesizers. And that's what that box is. And I have one.
Absolutely.
At least I don't know where it is, but I do have one.
Thank you. So at least now I can get it in operation. Now, would you say, as an engineer, I'd say, would you say, for me, I think to have in the studio, number one, a basic book on electronics. Yeah.
Quite handy to have. It's got very advanced now, so it's a very steep learning curve. I mean, my electronics, I know how FETs work and transistors and resistors and capacitors and stuff, but once you get into microprocessors, it's a whole different ball game. You've got to really understand the diagrams and the contents. But yes, having a certain knowledge of even the basics of soldering and testing continuity and all those sort of things, really useful to have. Even today, when it's all inside the box, some of the old principles apply. Multimeter, soldering iron, yeah. For those of you looking at this, the multimeter is on the right-hand side of your screen, and the soldering iron is on the left. I learned to solder when I was about 5, so I could solder before I could ride a bike.
Wow. So you truly are a don. So I would also say, what's essential in a studio? Old copy of Sound and Sound.
Oh yeah, well, that was all. They're nice to see him in the flesh.
Yeah.
Yes, this was the Bible.
Yeah.
As far as I was concerned, everyday and practical electronics and Sound on Sound and one or two others. Future Music, important one.
Very.
These were the magazines because we didn't have the internet. This is where we got our real solid knowledge from, was those magazines and people like Paul White. Oh yeah, absolutely. Was this the John Borick book? No, it's the Paul White book. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, absolute legends as far as I was concerned. And I would pore over those books and I would read everything, every advert, even if I'd read it the month before, everything about everything. I was like a sponge. I just wanted to know it all. I never did achieve it because, of course, life is passing you by all the time. But I was terrible for it. I suppose you might call me a slight geek.
Yeah, it's me too, slightly as well. Pete, we've got a message come in, right? It says, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching the legend that is Pete Ware." That's from Shin. Shin.
Oh, Shin, GC, Groove Control Shin.
I think so.
Oh, what a man! He's a lovely guy.
Well, how was it working with Shin, and how did that come about?
Oh dear. That would be in the late 90s. Shin will correct me, but that and he came to Spain as well because I emigrated to Spain in 2003, and we worked together, and we've done a little bit together in recent times too. And he's was into radio broadcasts for a long time too, wasn't he?
Oh yes.
Lovely guy, and another Cubaser as well. Come to that into his Steinberg products. And we just met through the industry and recorded stuff and had some fun doing it, So, just big shout out to him. What a great guy.
Brilliant. So, tell me more about the Irish Songwriters Guild, please.
Okay, again, I have to step back a couple of bits in order to make this leap.
Yeah.
You see, in a musical life, you do a lot of things, don't you?
Yeah.
If you're going to be professional at it, you have to do anything that comes because you never know when your next payday's coming. So you tend to do lots of weird things, and unless people know the connections behind them, they look like they're not connected. But in this case, it is very much connected. I, in the 80s, was very much a dance music producer, and that was running parallel with the Bhangra. And that's how things like Bhangra Fever got born, with a mixture of myself and Deepak Khazanchi, him on the more traditional Indian side and me into remixes and programming and everything else. That's where that fusion came from.
Brilliant.
Once that had played its game out, which was about by 1990, I had a brief spell as a house producer in Sunnyside Records, which was fun. And then I moved to the Midlands. And I settled at a studio called Famous Music, which will be known by many of the Bhangra heads.
Yeah.
And for me, I was becoming noticed and known as a Bhangra engineer, Bhangra producer, Bhangra musician, whatever. And it became a really good, successful business and operation, and we made many albums there. Lots of great people came through the doors. We spent more time laughing and rolling around the floor holding our stomachs than was probably healthy. But what great characters, and I'm still in touch with a lot of these people now. But anyway, what was less known was that the guy that I was in business with in the studio was working his way into Irish and country music. Wow. And so when I wasn't busy doing the Bhangra stuff,
yes,
I was playing stuff as a keyboard player. So put the Bhangra thing aside, and I was engineering too, but I was playing keyboards for him, and we were playing Irish music. So that went along quite successfully until a lovely guy called Charlie Lansbury wandered into the studio in 1994, and we recorded an album for him, as far away from Bhangra as it's possible to go, possibly. And that album went to #1 in Ireland. So then suddenly he had a touring situation. So it was natural that Terry, who was the guitarist, and it was his gig in the early days, would pick up a band from those people who played on the record, which was me. And so we went on tour, and I toured with Charlie for 5 years. And this was all theatres, concert halls, and everything else. And being a muso and not having this wall between music and physics and stuff, I had no wall between Bhangra and country music, and no wall between dance music and Bhangra. As far as I'm concerned, it's all form and function.
Yes.
So I started to absorb myself in Irish and American country. That went on. My situation with Famous came to an end in '97, at the end of '97.
Yes. Yeah.
I continued to tour with Charlie till 2000, actually. And then I set myself up as a producer on my own. From there, then, as the Bhangra thing kind of left its sunshine period for a bit, it went off the boil. It was a little too DJ orientated. It was feeding back on itself in that everybody was trying to sound like everybody else.
Yeah.
So I embraced this whole Irish and country thing and got into that as a main genre. And then, of course, that field of people started to come to me and continue to do so to this day. And along the way of that, I realised that there were lots of people writing great songs who weren't being very well presented. And a very good Irish friend of mine, Sean Murray, who I met in Spain, actually, and I set up the Irish and International Songwriters Guild to try and showcase some of the great songwriting that is around the world, from regardless from where. And we have sites, if you can find us on the websites, and we try and place songs and encourage songwriters and find outlets. And I ran a record company in the 2010s, which was releasing Irish and country albums, and we used to always try and use songwriters from the ISG, or the Irish Songwriters Guild, to feed those songs in, to give them a platform. So it was a sort of a passion project, really.
Well, regarding that, I think it's along the same vein that when I was young, I always wanted to meet and see Lord of the Lanes, rest in peace, Bartley Gorman from Atoxeter. He was a fighting champion, but he had a beautiful voice, and I always wanted to hear him sing, because it's only down the road from Wolverhampton. Atoxeter's not too far. But
it's the other side of Achanak, isn't it? Stafford Way.
That's right. Yeah. So I never got to do that. I know that's a bit random in there, but I'll just stick it in there. But
random connections are what this is all about. This whole sort of meandering career that I've had has been as a result of really random connections. I met Deepak Khazanchi on a session. Do you remember I said we were a session band?
Yes.
This was a particular artist, and they needed an extra guitarist. And when we turned up to do the session, Deepak Khazanchi was the extra guitarist, and he was playing in a reggae band at the time. Right. And that's how I actually met him. And he asked me to play keyboards on a couple of the things he was doing for Alaap in 1981. And if memory serves, that was on the two albums, Best Wishes and Dance with Alaap. So I played keyboards for him, and that's how we met. But we met because I was doing sessions,
I think I had the honour of interviewing Deepak in my early radio days back in 2013, and I'm sure that band, would it have been called the Rubber Band? It was.
Could have been, yeah. I know it was a reggae band, but I don't know exactly who or how. But I remember in the early days of Arishma, which was the studio we built together in 1985, I think he had been playing in a reggae band for quite some time, and certainly in the early 80s.
Lovely chap. Absolutely lovely chap.
And the weirdest guitar style you've ever seen. Because, I mean, get this. He plays a standard guitar upside down because he's left-handed.
Yeah.
But not strung the other way.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's missing this finger.
Yeah, he is. Wow.
So how he managed to become a great guitarist with all of that confusion going on is completely beyond me. But he's certainly a very clever musician, and we had some fab times together as well. We were creating something which essentially became a Bhangra craze. But you've got to remember, we didn't know we were doing it at the time. We were just having fun. We were going, well, what happens if you put a dumps, dumps, dumps underneath it, you know? Or what happens if we kill the whole groove there and just go to this? Because we were enacting my sort of dance remixes. Wow. And Deepak was a big enough headed and minded musician to allow me to get playful in that way. And I hope I was a broad enough minded musician to go, yeah, that works for me, you know. And so we weren't closing each other down. It was a very positive musical partnership.
Superb. So am I right to say this? This is what I picked up, and please add to this. Yeah, your list of Bhangra credits: Alaap, Asha, Bhosle, which was that track they did together, Chum Chum Najdi Fara, Achanak, Anakhi, Panjabi MC, DJ Sheikh, Shava, the Safri Boyz, Heera, Manjeet Kondal, interviewed him too, lovely guy.
Lovely guy.
Kang, yeah. Sahara.
Oh, Kang, great. What a great singer. Yeah.
My sister looks just like AS Kang. I'll just get that off my system. And
I can only apologise.
No. I met him. He's a lovely.
I don't know what your sister is like, but AS Kang, years since I met him now, this was mid-90s. What a delightful guy. Lovely.
Guy. He's lovely. Shin, Groove Control, Lucky, Deepa, Romi and Jazz, Aman, Santara, Intermix, Onks as a solo artist as well, Sukhpal, Sukh. Who else am I missing out?
Well, Sukhpal, well, hang on a minute. Sukhpal Sukh, although sort of an artist himself, is a music producer.
Yes.
Now, if you open the folder of Sukhpal Sukh, then you get into about 80 more albums because we did a heck of a lot over 15 years. We still talk now, of course. We did a huge amount. And remember that with Achanak, it wasn't one album. I think I did maybe 4 or 5. With Anakhi, I did several when they were with Ninda at Natural Records. But I did Jamming and what was the other one? I can't remember the other one for a minute. Somebody write in and say with Serge for Anakhi. And so quite a lot of the names you mentioned, there might be 5 or 6 albums in there. You know, there might be more than that. In the case of Charlie Lansborough, not on Bhangra, I know. I think I've done 18 albums for him over the years. So I'm pretty sure Achanak would be about 5. Safri Boyz, the ones that people will remember immediately, will be Bomb the Tumbi and Another Fine Mess.
Yes.
And tracks on Get Real as well. And a bit whilst I was in Kidderminster and a bit when I was in Spain, I think, and I've worked with Safri again in the last couple of years here and there. I've got Buta from Pardesi, what a great singer, coming in and doing a bit.
I met him.
Yeah, Onks has been in doing a few bits. He's got a scene going on. Herbie from Sahara is a regular here, and he's doing great on his own back. So behind all of those names and masses of other, there's an enormous amount of work, and in that enormous amount of work there's a huge amount of rolling on the floor and laughing.
Do you know, regarding the rolling on the floor and laughing part and a huge amount of work, right? I looked, you said you can use anything you want on my Facebook pictures now.
Oh dear. Am I going to regret that now?
Not at all, but what it is, Pete, right? There was this cartoon sort of sketches. And you know,
oh, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, with
you're talking Sanjay and Bombay Talkie, aren't you?
Yeah. And I looked at it and the way it described you, and Ninda Joel Hal sitting at the desk as well, and I thought this is absolute class. It's class.
Well, I don't think it's a complete secret to let you know that I'm working with Sanjay again at the moment on an entirely mental project.
Wow.
And that's coming along quietly in the background. Again, great guys, all of them. Ninda, what an inspiration. Bombay Talkie, lovely people, and smart too. You know, Rack and all of the people. And so weird. You know, these great people with Scottish accents as well. That was a bit strange when I met them in the early 90s. Fabulous people, great voices, lovely songs, and this weird thing. They did these cartoons inside the album sleeves, as you picked up on. There's a couple of things on YouTube if you can dig them out. There's at least one or two BBC interview shows. There's about a half-hour documentary on them that you can find. But they're all complete nutters. So from my point of view, it just made it more fun, you know.
I'm just trying to look at the list again. Why did it not? Did you work with Shin from DCS as well?
Not directly, no, not with Shin. I think we've crossed paths a bit, but not very much.
Cool.
But cool. I knew of DCS, of course, because another great, you know.
Brilliant.
There were kind of different pockets. You'd got Cam at Frantic had become a sort of a regular Bhangra producer.
Yeah.
There was me at Famous. There was it Mad Hat in Wolverhampton was another one.
That's right. Yeah.
There was Planet with Tom and Paul.
Yep.
And there were various pockets. There were a couple in London still, although the scene moved. Sorry, the scene moved away from London up to essentially Birmingham, which is where I was. But there were all of these pockets of great people. You know, you've got Premier on the west side of London and various others. Cool Jit. Lots of people making Bhangra music, but it became centres of excellence, or you know, where it was embraced and not something that an English style studio wouldn't know about. We became places that went, yeah, Bhangra, how loud do you want your tumba, you know? And I actually had pieces of equipment made to hold a dolak in such a fashion that it was comfortable to sit and work with it and have mics all over it and stuff, because we all embraced that whole thing, that whole vibe. It was great, you know, really good.
Superb. What was your input on the beautiful classic with Janine Asha Bhosle's Chum Chum Nashadi Fala?
Okay, I think that was a project that was started by Pandit Dinesh, if I remember right, and I think he was otherwise taken up and couldn't carry on with it. And I think I ended up that project. I think I finished it. I think I came in at halfway and finished it, if I remember right. And I think we ought to have a mention for High Tension, which was a studio in Hayes.
Wow.
At the time, which was what's his name? Bass player from Alaap, his place. And I think it was largely done there. Another great place, another sort of seat of excellent Bhangra stuff, you know.
Brilliant. And what was it like? What's it like working with Onks from Intermix and working with them, because their sound back in the day was, the fusion sound was so different, you know what I mean, in the mid 90s as to what they were doing. It's just amazing.
You see, I guess I was the commonality in that I was essentially doing the same thing, but every band and every artist has their own flavour. And so if you're good as an engineer, you don't impose your will on what they're doing. You embrace what they're doing and allow it to happen. So, you know, Intermix had their own style. They had their own way of thinking. Another band that I thought a bit similar to Intermix was PDM. Very much a group of people had their own way of doing things. So each time PDM came to the studio, we might work a certain way. If Safri or Gachoran Mal came into the studio, I would work a different way. If Bhuta Pardesi came into the studio, or Cylinder, come to that matter, would come in the studio, it would be a matter of making the session work, whatever it took, rather than trying to impose my will. So I would absorb what they were trying to do and then try and make it happen. And Intermix very much had their own sound back in that time, didn't they? And Anakhi and Achanak, they all had their own identities, because when I was involved in these things, I didn't try and scrub them out. I tried to help keep them going, you know, and develop them.
Absolutely fabulous. Brilliant. Now, you're self-taught, right, in the art of mixing and mastering. You know, has that been a difficult journey?
There weren't. You couldn't learn this stuff. There were no university courses. There were no college courses. The only way you could learn to be an engineer, and it was way more complicated back in the day, was to work in a studio. And the normal way you would work in a studio was you would start as the T-boy, or tape op as they were called, because you would control the tapes. And then after a year or two learning the ropes, you would be allowed to run the desk. Well, they call it allowed to run the desk. What it would mean is they've got a dodgy band coming in and the engineer doesn't fancy it, so it's your chance. That's how that worked. But I didn't have to do that because I was already in the studios as a session player. So being as I was already sessioning, then I was understanding, well, yeah, they're miking up a piano here, but why have they put a mic across the other side of the studio? What's that about? And how have they plugged that? And what a great trick. This was one I learned very early on. We had a singer. He was actually a very famous singer from the 60s, hugely famous. And he couldn't sing at all well with headphones. So he had to sing with monitors. Now, monitors are small loudspeakers for those of you who aren't into this big scale,
yes.
On which you played the music, and then he would sing, and then the microphone would capture his recording. But he couldn't sing with headphones. So therefore, what you captured on the microphone had his singing and the music on it as well, which is a problem because as soon as you add reverb to it, everything goes all swimmy and all sorts of things. But this guy couldn't handle the headphones. And I learned very early on from a wonderful engineer called Martin Webster, I think his name was. Give me a minute. It was a studio in Willesden, Morgan Studios in Willesden. I said, I was in on the session, how are you going to deal with that? He said, oh, I've got a trick. And what he would do is he would record the session with the music on the speakers and the singer. Then, once the singer had gone, he'd record the session again with just the backing track. So now he's got two recordings. He's got singer plus music, and he's got music. Then he'd say, look, now do this. And everything that went positive now goes negative. He would flip the phase. You'll know what I mean. Flip the phase of the backing track, and then he mixed the two together. Now, when you've got a backing track that's doing that, it disappears. It cancels. And he's left with just a clean voice. What a great trick. I mean, you could spend 15 years trying to learn that, and you end up with a clean recorded vocal. So that was the kind of stuff I was learning in 1981, 1982 from the very best, from the engineers who were at the top of their field, you know.
Oh my God. Oh my God. So it's public knowledge, right, that you've got golden ears, yeah. So to maintain those magical golden ears, right, do you do like this frequency training, like kung fu for ears, and do you mix at low volumes?
You know, these simple questions you keep asking me are really not simple. I played in bands a lot for many years, and you do get a certain amount of damage from cymbals and loud sounds. But I was always well onto that, and I would always try and make sure I was well away from the drummer. I'd wear, you know, an earplug or something like that. So I was amazingly protective of my ears. And when I was playing Bhangra back, that's absolute hell on your ears because it's a, you know, there's a lot going on at the top end. And I would wear headphones so as to avoid that. But I understood. Here's another little bit of learning. When you play a doll in a room, it's just below the threshold of pain. It is blinking loud, isn't it? So then you put microphones on a doll and you record it and you play it back on speakers quietly. It sounds miserable.
Yeah, it does. No life.
So in order to get the chemical vibe back, you had to play it at least the sort of level that it was played for real, or else all the musicians would go, it doesn't sound right. So then, of course, being an engineer, I'd be subjected to this all day, every day. So I very rapidly caught on to not listening to it myself. I'd say, listen, you listen to it as loud as you like, but I'm not being funny. I'm going to wear headphones just so that I protect my hearing. And I did that religiously for years and years and years. Are you with me so far, Dav? This gets a little bit more complicated now. So by the time we get to 2012, 2013, I've still got almost perfect hearing. I've dropped a little bit at high frequency, which you tend to do when you get a bit older, but more or less still very good hearing in terms of frequency, and able to hear tiny little discrepancies in mixes that people go, oh, why have you stopped it? I go, well, there's a click. And they go, what? There's a click in there somewhere. I don't know what it's on. A click? Play again. And they play it. I play it. I can't hear anything. Play again. Play it again. I say, it's there. It's on beat 3 of that bar. And we go, listen, let's find out. And we turn off all the various tracks. And we eventually find that the guitarist has just touched the pick on his pickup. And it's gone a little tiny noise like that. I've heard it, and they are still struggling to hear it when it's just a guitar on its own. Then I realised I'd got unusual hearing. So it was always like that till about 2012, 2013. Then I stopped recording almost completely in 2014 to look after my elderly dad. My mum passed. It was an awkward situation, and I wanted to do the best I could. So I spent 2 weeks of every month looking after my dad. He was in England. I was in Spain at the time. You can imagine confusion with that. And I spent quite a long time in my dad's last period of time in a very silent house with my dad, who was a very quiet man, in a situation of high stress. And what this leads me on to, the reason I'm telling you all this is that whilst I'd spent 30 odd years protecting my hearing, I started to suffer from stuff called hyperacusis. Wow. Now, hyperacusis is an oversensitivity to certain noises. So the tinkle of a teaspoon would make tears leap into your eyes and make you hold your ears. It's a horrible condition. Anyway, after my dad passed, Dad eventually passed away, but it left me with tinnitus. Now, tinnitus, for those of you, especially you young guns wearing your blasting ear, you are going to regret that. Trust me, guys, turn it down. Turn it down. What it left me with was tinnitus, which is a constant ringing in my ears. And when this happened, this was 6 or 7 years ago now, I thought my career was over. I thought I could no longer do it. I was frightened. I was miserable with the stress of that, which only made it worse. I was also miserable because having protected my ears really well for 30 years plus, then to get tinnitus was just plain rotten. That was just bad luck. Yeah, but anyway, I had this tinnitus, and I have this tinnitus. And it affects just one frequency band. It's quite high. It's about 10K for those of you into studio stuff. So it's like a high-pitched ringing. And people would still come to me for work, and I'd be going, I don't think I could do that. I don't know. Can I mix? Can I do anything? And the stress was enormous. So I mixed a few things, and far from people saying, no, it's not working for me, there's something wrong, nobody said anything like it. They said, yeah, great mix, no problem. Absolutely perfect. No spot on what we wanted. Sounds brilliant. And I'd be going, really? And I learned over a period of time that actually this tinnitus doesn't affect me very much in terms of mixing or mastering. And I can explain that. I mean, I don't want to get too technical about this, but imagine you're looking out of a window, and somebody has painted a big black spot on the window, right? And you can't see through that spot, right? But then a bus goes past. You know the bus is going past, even though you can't see it in that spot. Because of everything else that's around it, you know what the image should be. Yeah. So you can perfectly well get around it. If you've got ringing in your ears, I know it's just a little bit below 10K. I tend not to mess around with EQ, especially very much in those areas, because I know that what I'm hearing isn't very accurate. So I just go, well, it looks all right on the scale. Everything below it and everything above it is right. I've still got about 13, 14K, which is damn good for somebody who's 64 in 2 days' time, you know.
Wow.
And that one frequency, I don't worry about it. I just get on with my day, because sonically it's not important. What's more important is selling the idea, selling the music, making the vocals sound great, connecting people with people. And if it's a little bit deficient at 9.6K, who cares? You know, when we listened on cassettes, the cassettes barely got up there, never mind above it. When we listened on records, it was on LPs, it was full of crackle and noise and hum and all sorts of things. On CDs, yes, you might notice, but virtually nobody listens on CDs now. They listen on MP3s, and although good MP3 is pretty good, up around 10K and stuff, it's pretty crap, actually. So it doesn't really make a lot of difference. The problem with the MP3 is it gets washy. Cymbals wash at that frequency. So I just don't let it worry me, Dave. I just get on with my day. And until somebody goes, he's not up for it, or goes, I can do that better than you, I'm just going to carry on.
Soldier. Pure soldier. It's all.
Just enjoy it and enjoy the progress. I did an album late last year in a country American sort of country rock sort of area. And across the board, the record companies, the artists, everybody associated said it sounded, not necessarily the songs, but it sounded brilliant. And I mixed that in the same way as I mix everything else. So that reassured me that I've still got a bit of time in me yet. It might get worse. I might get deafness, and that would be probably end game. But for now, I'm not worrying about it.
Pete, you got to watch that film, dude. It's called it's on Amazon Prime. It's called The Sound of Metal.
I've seen it trailed. I haven't yet watched it. Yeah, it's the drummer who suffers hearing loss, isn't it?
Yeah. And well, actually, no, that's gonna put you on a downer. Don't watch that film called The Sound of Metal.
Now, listen, I've got this fairly worked out now. I've had it for 6 or 7 years. It was rotten at the beginning of it. The stress and the fear of the future, because I've never done anything else. Remember, I've only ever done this. Was just awful. But you know, you get over it. It's a bit like, you know, you have a motorbike accident, you break your leg badly, and you walk with a limp from then on. You can still get about. You know, it doesn't necessarily stop you. It only stops you if you let it mentally. Exactly. And I've got the mental strength to blast through it now. You know.
Amazing. Can I ask a question? What was it like tracking on an 8-track?
Hard, actually, because you had to plan it. Funny, you see, there's running gags everywhere. You have to plan it, because if you want more than 8 things, then you can't fit them, can you? So you would go, okay, we're going to record drums, bass, and 2 guitars and a guide vocal, all on different tracks. So 4 for the drums, say. Bass would be 5, 2 guitars on 6 and 7. Oh no, it's too many. Okay, so we'll put drums on a pair, we'll put bass, we'll put a couple of guitars and a guide vocal, and we'll only use 6 of the tracks. Then, once we've done that, we'll take those 6 tracks and we bounce them to tracks 7 and 8. Now that means we've got our backing track here, but now we've got 6 new tracks for guitar overdubs and vocals. And then you'd fill up those and you go, oh, hang on a minute, backing vocals, we've got too many. You go, oh, okay, so I'll tell you what, we record 4 tracks of backing vocals and bounce them to 1. So now we've got 3. And then we'll record organ and harpsichord, whatever it might be, and we'll bounce them to 1. And now we record, we need more backing vocals. Oh, bugger that. How do we do that? Okay, well, we'll record 3 more backing vocals and record them to 1. And then we'd go, and so you'd fill it up in that fashion. And then when you finally got all of your 8 tracks filled, you'd then mix it onto a 1/4-inch tape. And that's how 8-track works. You just have to plan ahead. It's great. It's great from a mental point of view. Unlike you know our modern DAWs where you could have 190 tracks, you have to plan, and planning is everything. And that planning teaches you to execute the process and get to an end. I know lots of people who've been playing with Cubase for 30 years and they're still on the first album because they've got so much choice. They never get to finish anything. They want to change things because their mental mindset has changed. Whereas when you're working commercially, you've got to do all that I've just said in an afternoon. So you have to get on with it. You have to make it happen. And you just have to go, well, what are we going to record? This. How am I going to work that out? And then when you're on a 24 track, the same thing happens. You run out of tracks. So then you go, I'll take my 24 tracks and I'll bounce them to 2 tracks. And then I'll bounce those 2 tracks onto another 24 track. And then I've got 22 new tracks to play with. And it would get really complicated. And then, of course, we had sequencers and synthesizers and stuff. And you'd have a load of stuff that was running what we'd call live in the studio at the same time. And you end up with 70 sound sources. And you go, oh, how am I going to deal with this? and then organising yourself is really important. And I use those same techniques, even though I've got unlimited. I mean, the biggest project I've mixed on this system here had 140 audio tracks, which was a lot. But a lot of it was you'd have a guitar recorded in stereo with 2 pairs of mics and a third pair right at the back of the studio. So you got 6 tracks for one guitar, So it gets complicated. But organisation is what gets you through, and having an end goal and a fixed time that you have to finish something by.
Yes,
that's really important. If you allow yourself too much freedom, certainly in my case, you just don't finish stuff. You just get lost in the maze of it.
That sounds just like me, because right now I am I'm mixing Rosala, and that was meant to be due for around Christmas time, and so
yeah. I think the track involved that I think you mentioned it to me off air, I think has already been released as a single, hasn't it? Isn't
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Let me tell you, Guy, you're a little late.
I know. I was late for the radio interview, so it's just. Do you know what it was? I think I was battling like being down mentally as well, and I didn't want that to impart into the track and in the production, and so I found for me a coping mechanism, because the only time I felt even a slight bit of depression in my life towards the end of lockdown was right towards the end, and I found the solution for me was to lift heavy weights. I'm not even kidding. I found half an hour of lifting heavy iron. I found gone. Just that feeling of being down is gone. I feel charged up again. And as soon as I realised, if I lift iron every other day and it's heavy, I can produce in a studio. So anyway, that was random, but.
Well, no, I think that's quite important. You've found a workaround. It burns out the stress. Yeah. For me, going off and doing the robot things with family, and they're heavy things to lift as well, come to that. I walk. I do all sorts of things. I keep physically as fit as I can. I cycle. Because what is hard to understand is if you go to work and you're in a fairly regular day job, you can just go to work. But if you're trying to produce something and your mind is a fog and you're stressed and you're down and you're maybe lonely, because that happens in studio situations, then you can't produce attractive music under those circumstances. So you have to find a coping mechanism where you either make the music when you're feeling good, or you have to find a way of making yourself feel good. And that sometimes means going away and switching off and doing other stuff. But you have to be reasonably positive in the studio, or you just lose your way.
Wow. Now, what's your favourite studio microphone for tracking vocals?
Well, the microphone I've got here is an NT1A by Rode.
Cool.
Bog standard, £160 mic. I love them. And the reason I love them is that they're very brisk and bright and presency.
Yeah.
I think I've got 4 of them. I think I've got 2 here and 2 in Spain. They've never let me down. The ones I had early on will be 25 years old. They've never blinked. I've never had one go wrong. They don't make any noise. They make a vocal sound really good, so I don't use any EQ. I just record the vocal. People say, how do I get that great vocal sound? I don't. I just record it. It's just an NT1A with a pop shield. And I've got the reason I'm gesticulating is I've got a vocal booth over there, by the way.
Yeah.
I compress it a little bit before it goes into the system. Yeah. Any of you guys recording vocals and you're going straight into a DAW, Cubase or Ableton or Logic or whatever, you're going to really struggle. Get yourself a hardware compressor. Go through a little desk, with half decent preamp if you can, and just compress those vocals a little bit. You'll thank me for it. And not only you, there's another element to this. When I have a singer come in here and I forget to switch on the compressor and I try and record straight to the DAW, they're going, I just don't feel myself today. It's just not happening. I don't feel I've got any presence and power. And I go, oh, bloody hell, I've forgotten the compressor. You punch the compressor in and they go, oh, yeah, that's better. So it has a direct influence on how the singer sounds to themselves. And that has a direct influence on the way they sing onto the record. So it makes a huge difference. So personally, I would recommend a hardware compressor. You could get a Joe Meeke type thing. I've got Behringer's, not expensive stuff. And I go from microphone through the core down. It's a what is it? It's a Folio. It's a small Soundcraft desk.
Yes.
I go out on a loop to a Behringer Composer Pro, I think it is.
Yeah.
Then back into the loop, through the fader, into my digital converter, which is a Steinberg, Yamaha, whatever, UR, whatever it is. And I go into the computer, and there's nothing complicated about it. You see people all the time on all of the Facebook groups going, what compressors suggest an EQ for this? What plugins do I need to get a great vocal? I'm telling you guys, you don't need jack. You need a good vocal, a half decent mic, a bit of a compressor, and a good pair of ears, and a good flow in the studio. You've got to be enjoying it, man. If they're trying to sing and sound happy, if you're bugging them and being an arsehole, then that doesn't work.
It's true. It's true.
So if you get tense, that is not going to help. You need them to be in their happy place, because what they're doing is then important for the recording. I've always called it, magic dust. You get that magic dust on the old multitracks or in any kind of recording if you're vibing it in the studio and enjoying it. And then some of that, I suppose that you can reduce it to technology, but what's really happening is if you're enjoying it, then there's those subtle nuances in your voice get into the recording, and you can hear somebody trying not to laugh, which is the most attractive human trait in the world, isn't it? When you know that they're close to the edge of breaking up. It's just, we all want to be in that place all the time, So trying to maintain an air of fun and spirit and performance, far more important than whatever mic you use, far more important than compressors and desks and everything else. Get the right feeling. That's what I would say. And if you've got good gear, great. But that great gear doesn't make a great recording, but you can make a great recording with only adequate gear. That's the difference. Because when you listen to an old record from the 1950s or 60s that you love that is on a cassette, is it still a great record? Of course it is. Yes, and yet it's a crap recording. It's still a great record. And you can record crap on the best system ever, and it's still crap. It's just very highly polished crap, but it is just still crap. So look for the heart, look for the soul in the music, look for the message that you want to promote. And remember that music is like telepathy. You want to connect the artist to the singer, and all of the rest in the middle is there to trip you up.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the key to it,
deep.
I would say.
Actually, that's very, very, very deep what you just said there, isn't it? That
only took me 45 years to learn it, Dave.
But thank you for sharing it with us. It's beautiful. Now, I know we spoke about it's not always about the gear and everything, right? But what is your favourite analog mixer and why?
I've always been a futurist in that I've always embraced new techniques and new gear. Yeah. I used to find in the 80s when I went to the really, really good desks that I struggle on them. You go into your first SSL equipped studio, and those are the desks, anybody, if you've not seen them, that you need a bicycle to get along in. Massive things. And I did some, hands up, I did some crappy mixes on SSL. And it wasn't the SSL's desk, but they were very complicated beasts. And unless you really knew how to work them, they were hard.
Yeah.
And many of the cheaper desks, which were a bit more straightforward, signal comes into the top, gain, EQ, couple of auxes, down to a fader, groups over here, that ordinary people could understand pretty fast. I used to get better results on. So I liked slightly simpler processes.
Yes, yeah.
Then, of course, as you know, as a Cubase and Steinberg user, that it all started to go in the box about, 15 years ago?
Yes.
Something in that kind of order.
Yeah.
By in the box, what I mean is that we do all of our mixing inside the computer, for anybody who's not technical. If you're technical, you'll know what in the box means. Yes. And so I really was drawn to this. I'd spent years in the 80s finishing a mix, knowing that it had to be right because there was another session coming in, trying to write down every fader, every EQ position on a desk, every auxiliary send out to reverbs and echoes and stuff, and try to get to a point where I could reproduce that mix on another occasion, and it would never work. Something would be wrong, or just the fact it was a different day.
Yes.
And Frank, if it was a hot day in the studio and the studio was moist air and all that stuff, it would sound different anyway. Then the really good desks like Solid State Logic SSL and Harrison and the other big desk makers created what was called Total Recall. Yes. And Total Recall was bollocks. Total Recall recalled everything on the desk, which was brilliant, and it worked. It was class. Every fader, every position, it would have a little light around it, or it would, better still, the fader would go zip, and it would work great. But what it didn't do is it didn't reset all of the outboard gear that you used back in those days. So it was a brilliant idea, but still pretty useless. It was like using, I don't know, some huge mega car to get down the local shops. It got you there in 0.9 of a second, but you couldn't park the damn thing because you couldn't see where the curb was. You know, it was brilliant technology, but it didn't really work. Then we went in the box. Yeah. Once you're in the box, all of your mixing desk, all of your reverbs, all of your synthesizers, everything is in the box with you, and you hit that Control S, or if you're a Mac, you know, Mac and S, whatever it is, and everything is saved. I was in love again, because that for me was the biggest technological thing that had ever happened relatively recently, 15 years ago. So I fully embraced getting in the box, right? Yeah. So I've been in the box for about 15 years now. But your question, sorry I have to speak so long about this.
I love it.
But your question was, which is my favourite a big analog desk?
Yeah.
I mentioned SSL. There were some great British desks, Tridents and Neves. There were great American desks, APIs, Harrison. I don't know where Harrison comes from, but and others. There's, you know, no, I won't list anymore. You can find them on the internet. In the last couple of years, folks, somebody has done something very clever with those great old desks. It's a company called Softube, and there are others, Waves. And what they do is they look at one of these gargantuan big old desks, which I couldn't even fit one in this room. Yeah. And somebody far more nerdy than I'll ever be has gone through and figured out what every knob does to every possible sound that could go through it at every possible level. And even what happens when you put too much in or too little, so it's distorting. And they've built the whole of this knowledge into a box. In my case, it's called a Softube Console 1. And I know this is close to your heart because you've got one, haven't you? Yes. Right. So, Dav, turn this on end. Turn it on its side, up on end, right? Turn it up, that way. Yeah. Up first, up. Yeah, that's it. Right. Yeah. So now, imagine your big mixing desks that were 15, 20 feet long. Yeah. They had lots of vertical strips, and each strip had a load of knobs and buttons on it. Yeah. And what you're looking at on that picture is one of those channels, right? Wow. Yeah. So that's one channel from a major big desk called an SSL, right? And so what Dav can do and what I can do is inside the box, we can sound like an SSL. And when you turn it up too loud, it distorts like an SSL. When you EQ it, which is change the tonality of it, it sounds like an SSL. When you use compressors and everything else, it works, and it is, to all intents and purposes, an SSL. And let me tell you, they are great mixing desks, although I hated them in the 80s. They are great mixing desks. But it doesn't even end there. Yes. You're grinning like a Cheshire cat. And the reason is that you spend a bit more money, and you can say, I don't fancy mixing on an SSL today. I want to mix on a Neve, which is the great British desk of the 1960s and 70s. Yeah. And you go click, click, click. And now every knob that Dav's holding up there, it sounds like a Neve. And then you go, hey, but I'm doing country. I want American sound. What's the great American desks? Well, there's a great American desk called an API. And you go, oh, I want it to sound like that kind of Nashville sound or whatever it is. And you go click, 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 API desk. So now Dav and I, we can make music that sounds exactly like it was mixed on these great desks, but it's small enough to hold in your hand, and the information, crucially, is all in the box. So that's great. And here's one final capper, and it's absolutely a corker. I can say I want the input stage to be an SSL. I want the EQ to be a Neve. And I want the output, because I particularly like the distortion on the output of the American version, I want the output to be an API. And we can even customize it. So I would use, typically, I'd use a British desk for the sound of a vocal. I'd use the SSL for the tone of the vocal. And if I want that vocal to have a bit of attitude and dirt, I'd use the API. So I'm using different monstrous desks all the time. So I don't really have a favourite because I've got them all.
Pete, is it all right if I put this thing down now?
No, keep it. No, of course. I mean, that kind of does it, doesn't it? That's what it's about.
It is, but do you know what? One thing.
You put it down. I thought you like lifting heavy weights.
Oh, do you know what it was? I thought the way it's like my immigration interview, the way he's put me through all his trials.
That bad, huh? I'd never be able to pass one of them, that's for sure.
Do you know? We got a message come through. This from Raj Singh saying this guy's a true legend in the Bhangra industry. He's made some of the biggest hits. Awesome interview. Boy, I think that's all down to Pete. To be honest, it's just me with all the cock ups of major scale ones. But okay. Hardware synths versus software synths. Do you still use hardware synths?
I very sadly had my lovely Minimoog synth stolen when I was in Spain. It was beautiful, blonde, £2,000 worth. It was stolen.
Yeah.
And I more or less went in the box with synths in exactly the same way as desks in 2006, 2007. And for the last 15 years, I've been in the box with synths.
Yeah.
There's a but. And the but is that I miss some of that tweaking and twiddling.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that a relatively cheap, accessible company called Behringer.
Yes.
I know you've got something you can hold up or show in a minute, maybe. I've started to reproduce some of the classic synths that I was programming professionally in the 1980s. Yes. And they're releasing them, and they're surprisingly cheap. Now, I mentioned that my Minimoog was worth £2,000. Yes. Now, look what Dal's got there. That looks pretty much like a Minimoog, and let me tell you, it sounds damn close to a Minimoog. And it's about, what, 350, 300 quid, something like that?
Not even that, mate. 264 quid, Digital Village.
There you go. And that has got all of the classic sounds that I used to use in the 80s. And what it doesn't have is it doesn't have memories, which is a bit of a pity. But neither did the Minimoog. But what it does do is it works really well. It sounds great, and you can record it into your DAW, and you can play music from your DAW, so you can sequence it inside your DAW. And so it's a classic reborn. So I probably won't buy that one because I've got a pretty good emulation in the computer, but I think I'm going to buy one by Sequential Circuits called the Pro 1, and I think the cheapest I've seen that is about 220 quid. So I have been in the box, Del, but I'm coming out of the box pretty soon.
Okay. Now, can I hit you with a curveball, please?
Oh God, here we go.
All right. Here we go. What I've discovered, right, and for those of you who've taken the time and put the effort into listening to the legend on this interview, is I've had made a custom linear power supply, like 320 quid worth of power supply with 2 toroidal transformers. Now, what I've noticed, one of the advantages as to going outboard, with hardware bits of equipment, is if that thing's got a DC barrel jack on the end of it, and you plug in to that sexy linear power supply, which has got a lot of headroom, that gear can sound better. Such as my old converters over here. I've got some EMU 1820M old ass converters, and they are gangster. And if you put them with a linear power supply, the way I've done it with the wire rig and everything, it's like the headroom and the noise floor is it's orgasmic. Like and I tested it back with this running off the computer power supply. Then I went back to the linear. I'm like, once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. Now,
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
I know it sounds boring what I'm saying to you, but one of the advantages is that, you know, when you get your Pro one, 'cause I'm gonna get the Pro one next as well, to be fair. And I was looking at the Neutron as well, and
Yeah.
they all stack up nice. And actually, my eyes are on the what's it called? What's it? Wow, for God's sake! They've got the blue marina version of it. I can't think what it's called. It's the great
Not
big.
not the OBX.
No. Oh, that of course.
That was the OBXA was a big blue thing, wasn't it?
Oh no, they've got it in blue, and they've got it in. It's just come out, but they're releasing it in ARP 2600. Yeah.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'll pick up one of those as well. But in my life, the difference between me and you, Pete, A, you're flipping talented. B, you actually use the stuff, right? Me, I'll buy it, and in my dream, I'm gonna use this one day. But because I signed up to the world of radio, of poverty, and eating old fruit, I'll never get to use it. But from my point of view, you know, if you pick up a linear power supply and you try that out on your gear, providing you set your voltage correctly and all the rest of that, and you may have a shock. At my end, running those old EMU 1820M converters, it's beautiful. Like, I know I may sound mental to you, but it's beautiful.
Let me ask you a question. It's a bit techie, and apologies if you're listening to this interview and you're not very techie, but I think what you're referring to is a power supply that has plenty of headroom, which means it can do much more than it has to.
Yeah.
And minimal jitter.
Yeah, that's the word, jitter.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would like to suggest, and that you couldn't do this practically, but if you got, I mean, most power supplies have a naught in the middle and a positive and a negative in the case of this. If it's just a little barrel connection, it'll just be a positive. It might be 24 volts, for the argument's sake. If you were to take away all your power supplies and just substitute one or a pair of LiPo batteries, which are immensely powerful
and clean,
would you get the cleanest possible signal? Well, you couldn't do it practically because you'd be charging them, and they do tend to catch fire if you don't charge them properly and stuff. But in terms of hi-fi, would that not be the cleanest possible power source?
Pete, you're correct. From my research and my experimentation, you are not going to beat a battery. You can't beat it.
No.
You cannot beat it whatsoever. It's impossible to beat it. But I have actually experimented with a upstepping power supply sort of thing, just temporarily, because over here I soldered together 4 Carnhill transformers. We drilled, thanks to my friend Steve, he drilled the 19-inch rack mount unit, and thanks to Colin of Audio Maintenance, he put together these warmerizers, nice whatever they are. And they're basically a Carnhill tranny with a step up or step down thing on it. About 165 quid, I think. I don't know how much it is. I can't remember how much it is, but I don't know how much they are. Maybe 70. I don't know how much they are, but I've got 4 of them in the box, running a linear power supply, and I think running the mix through those, and like even just listening to music through those. And I thought that was phenomenal, because I do everything on a budget. Like you know, my computer's old. It's like a rat in a wheel.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but it's just but I don't earn anything from what I do. See, like, you're a professional, so
doesn't necessarily mean I own very much. And one final comment on that: if you can't afford a really nice, powerful linear power supply, what guys and girls can do, of course, is slap a load of capacitors on the end of their wall mount thing. At least that won't get you the power you really need, but it will help to smooth out some of the jitter. Yeah. Make sure that if you're running a 24 supply, you need 63 or 100 volt caps and the biggest microfarad numbers that you can manage in your budget and box. But that will help. That will certainly clean things up a bit. I incline to agree with you. Relying on wall wart power supplies is kind of a bit dodgy. You know, it's better to come use your computer's power supply than that.
That's what I've been experimenting with, actually, is caps, is this high-end Japanese caps, and just looking at them and putting them away. So I'm just waiting for the ones to die in my gear, and they're not dying yet. I will looking to leak or bulge, and then I will get the desoldering kit out and change them all over.
Because these lipos and caps have a very fast response time, so they can fill in. If you've got a wavery power supply, they fill in all those jitters. and flatten it out.
Wow.
And I know this not because of music. I know this because if you don't do that correctly with the kind of speed controls you use in robots, it's funny how it comes full circle.
Yeah.
You blow your speed controls, the jitter and the interference between cables is really major in robots. So having lots of really comfy capacitors on the end smooth things out and make them all squidgy really helps. And so it does in audio. You see, there's a connection between all of this stuff.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Pete. There's an old engineer saying, right, that you can't polish a turd, right? Now, have you encountered any turds, and have you attempted to polish them?
No, I've never been anywhere near anything that wasn't absolutely spectacular. You do get some that are difficult, but then it's all down to attitude. If somebody is trying very hard but not managing to produce anything good, that's worthy of effort. If somebody is capable of being a lot better than they are being because they're being lazy, maybe not so much. But I try and look for the positives in anything and try and get the best results regardless. And if somebody isn't doing well or they're not very good, try and figure out what it is that's wrong. Quite often people sing quite well and then they get in the studio and they're all over the place, for example. But if they're all over the place, the chances are they're not used to having headphones on, and that can mess with your pitching. They're not used to the stress of feeling that a red light has gone on and that something is going to be captured. And they're trying to control, when you think of the detail of it, with a singer in particular, but this obviously happens with fingers and performance as well, but with a singer in particular, that singer is, without thinking about it, because they're trying to do the delivering the emotional bit, they're trying to adjust the tension in some muscles in their throat within an accuracy of a tiny fraction of a percent in order to produce a whole series of notes in the right order and then move all of these throat muscles around and mouth muscles around. And we take that all completely for granted. And for the most part, it works well. But if that person is stressed, then you know what happens when you get stressed. Your voice goes up in the air, your leg starts to wobble, and you generally feel a bit queasy, don't you? Yeah, you cannot expect to do your best work under those circumstances. So I would see it as my job to try and get that person to a place of safety when they're scared. Possibly it might be you're not doing as... You clearly don't think you're doing well. Why don't you come and have a listen to what you've done so far? Because it will give you good information on what you've done. And it will possibly say that you've actually done quite a bit better than you thought you had. So you emphasize the positive. And so you can sometimes think this is going to be, pretty poo. But if you can get the right attitude in the studio and the right level of focus and concentration and figure out what's going on, you can actually make a lot from not very much. And I would prefer to do that rather than call something unusable or bad. Yeah. I would always try and salvage it and look for what's going on. Is it that the artist is nervous? Yes. Sometimes it's just the song's crap and there's not much you can do about that. But it may be that the song's crap in that form. But if you go, well, it's actually pretty weak as a song, but I could put a kicking, repeating lead over that, which will get in people's ears, it can still be a hit, even though the song's not much cop. You know what I mean? Yeah, so you just look for the positives and don't waste time stressing about what's crap about it and try and find what's good about it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. At least you can walk away from the session knowing that you did your best. And that applies to the singer or the player as well.
Thank you, Pete. That's a great answer as well. Very diplomatic as well about it as well. I love it. Very professional. So
well, there's no point in getting enraged because that doesn't solve anything, does it?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to get far doing that. You've got to pick these things apart.
Could you please tell me a funny studio story?
Oh, dearie me. I've been doing this since 1900 and frozen to death. I don't know. There have been so many, Dab. I don't think I could pick any particular one. Not really a studio story, more of a computer story. All right. But with a Bhangra relationship. Yeah. Back when we had in that intermediate period before computers could record audio, but when they were recording sequences, we had the Ataris and stuff. They were relatively, we didn't know this at the time, but they were relatively slow. And when you went to copy the contents of one folder to another, it would have this lovely little graphic, and it would have a whirl of paper going over the two folders from here to here, and it would do this. Do you remember? Yes. On the old Ataris? Yes. On this particular day, my great friend Balvinder Safri was in the studio. I love the guy. I mean, he's a nutter, another nutter. And he was looking over my shoulder watching this happen, and he said, these computer geniuses, they reckon they've got it really sorted out. He said, but I can tell you this, that would be a lot quicker if they put those folders next to each other.
Oh my God.
Which, you're not laughing, and probably nobody's laughing, but I thought that was hilarious. They've got all this fluttering from side to side, and he said, if you put them next to each other, it'd be quick, you know. I think that's funny.
No. I'm evaluating it. It's actually quite genius if you think about it.
It's a completely ridiculous statement, but in a beautiful way.
It is. It's just
such a non. You see, why it's funny to me is us being computer nerds and geeks. Yeah. We would know, well, the computer's busy and it's done a graphic while it's doing. He's just reacting with the obvious. You've got two folders, you want to move to one to the other, you put them next to each other. I love it. So I thought it was a great comment.
It's genius.
It is genius in that it's a different viewpoint. So that made me laugh, and I continue to laugh at that 25 years on or whatever it is. I still think that's very funny.
Do you know the funny thing is, like, a lot of the best solutions will come from, you know, from what the hell's that in the background? Oh, sorry.
It's not mine.
No,
it must be you talking. Is that you talking?
It's not the police helicopter to try and come take me away. It's true.
They're trying to get you offline. I reckon that's what it is.
The cannabis.
They say those two guys there. We've talked too much rubbish for one day.
Oh, bloody hell! So we've already discussed your next acquisition for the studio. I think it was the Behringer Pro 1.
Pro 1, probably.
Top man.
And the thing is, there isn't a cheap or free equivalent in the computer that's really much cop. Yeah. Whereas there've been a number of virtual models of the Moog that you've got there, and so I think that's why I'd go Pro 1 first.
Got me thinking now. You just said that about computer modeling. Now, I don't think computers can model valves well. I think they're good, but when you've actually got proper valves, I mean, I've got some old Jan Phillips, you know, Joint Army Navy NOS valves, and I've changed them over in my microphones and that, and it's just orgasmic, like what they're doing.
They have the real stuff has an unpredictability about it. They have good days and bad, and they react differently to atmospherics. If it's very cold in a room, they'll be different. Yes. And if you want a bit of nice creamy randomness in your production process, then they're the way to go. But they can, that's on the good day. On the bad day, you know, they crackle a bit and they could be a bit awkward. So using a virtual reproduction, for me, in a commercial world when I don't have time for them to have a good day, I'm for now sticking with the modelling. But I do go with the very best of the modelling firms. I love Wave stuff and Softube and the people who are really doing it properly. Because you can get somebody who's built a synth and they're calling it a mini Moog or something, but let me tell you, they don't all sound the same. But when you go for the good stuff, and they get pretty darn close. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, and also, you're more into electronics than me. I wouldn't be able to fix valve stuff. That'd be way above my pay grade. So.
Do you know what it is? I don't mind messing around with valve stuff and modding stuff, right? But you know, when it comes to power supplies, right? I always commission that work to a specialist because that involves your life. If you get that wrong, you're going to be dead.
Well, it just blows you up and blows everything else up, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. So, how did you end up working with Energize?
Well, you see, again, it's another full circle. We all work in circles. I was a dance music producer in the 80s, and Energize tend to specialise as one of their specialities in singers from the 80s. And they want stuff mixed, even if it's new stuff, mixed in the style of the way we mixed stuff in the 80s. So it was just a natural marriage, if you like, that rather than have somebody imitating how people worked in the 80s, get somebody who was there. So I just more or less have free reign to just mess about as I like, because I suppose if I'm a genuine article in that sense, used to running those big boards and the 2-inch tapes and the lining up and all of the frustrations in that, then because I did that, I can translate that into my method of working on a DAW, which isn't that different to the way I'd work a big desk.
Yeah.
And so I possibly naturally make decisions that make things end up sounding like the sort of thing that Energize want to put out. I think it's as simple as that. And the guys have got great attitude, and you know, they're good people. And we have lots of people in common because lots of the artists are my friends. So
wow,
it's lovely, you know.
That's some seriously great voices on the repertoire, man. So you know what I mean. I think you got Hazel Dean, you worked with Nikki.
Lifelong friend. Yeah, 1983 I first worked with Hazel Dean, and she's still a family friend to this day. Nikki French, who did Eurovision in 2004.
What a voice!
Great singer, great stuff she does. You know, loads of them.
Rosala,
another one.
Yeah. You got Sean Smith.
Yeah. I also, aside from Energize, got to work with Yaz.
Wow.
Fantastic. She's in Spain. I did an album with Yaz in 2007 or 8, 9, something like that. What a lovely lady. And great experience. So, you know, those people and we're from an era. And so mixing stuff to sound like it might have happened in the 80s, but using all the latest gear, it's great. It's interesting. It's fun.
I'd find it. You know, me, I love my old Midas Venice 240 board, right? And it's just got something. It's not the most expensive board, but whatever goes through it, it imparts character. Does some magic to the low end. It's got space within the architecture to open it up and fit some Sauter transformers in there. If I need to do that, but you can't get hold of the daughter board for love or money, unless I, you know, commission someone to build it and get it done in bulk. But there's not, I don't know. So that's why I ended up building the tranny box over here. See, on the outboard, so it's got more routing options for me over here. But like I said, I'm just a dreamer, joker smoker, because like I said, the world of radio has taken over everything in my life. If you could get hold of a modified DeLorean, right? And you could
okay.
And if you go back in time,
I can guarantee it won't start.
if you can go back in time and this modified DeLorean, if you manage to get it to start, right? As a lad, what would you tell yourself as a lad? What words of wisdom would you give to yourself?
I would say have enough faith in yourself. That would be my words back. I wasn't shy once I got into my 20s, but I questioned my own abilities, and still to this day do so. But my life got a lot better when I started to make my own decisions, and to have faith that if you make a bad decision, live with it, but know that you're going to be there in the future to try and fix it. And also know this, that the you in the past might have made a decision that was bad, and you can't change any of that. But you can say, I made the best decision I could make with the information I had at the time, and be content with yourself. And I've spent a lot of years, right up through the whole period in the 80s. I had a long association with Stock Aitken and Waterman, which was ended up to be quite sour, which is a pity. And inevitably your situations through the decades pass away, and you know. But to be true to yourself, live by the decisions you made back then. Accept that you're going to make some mistakes in the now, and that you're going to have to try and work with them in the future. But just allow yourself to believe that you're okay at all this, That's the most important thing. That don't let anybody persuade you that you can't do something. If you feel you can do it, do it. If you fail, it doesn't matter. But at least be faithful to yourself. If you start out expecting to fail, then you will fail. You've got to start out believing that you will achieve and aim high, because then hitting low is not a failure. But not aiming high enough and expecting to miss completely, that is a failure. So I would say to my young self, be true to yourself and believe in your own abilities to cope in the future. And because I was scared of the future, and I'm still scared of the future now, I guess. But that's what I would say.
What a beautiful answer. Very, 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 very deep. I thought I'd quickly show you these. You're probably wondering, what the bloody hell is he doing? But these, right, are bits of foam, right?
Yeah, yeah. Do they hold your man boobs up or something? Or what are they?
No. But they hold the console one up.
Ah, okay. Well, that's really high tech. I mean, my console one, well, I don't know, it's sort of high tech. It's held up with this. I don't know whether you can see that. It's two pieces of very cheap floorboard wood and a few bits of foam. That's what holds my console one up.
Wow.
And, I can't bring the console one across because I'll pull the studio apart, but that's what mine sits on.
Wow.
It's not high tech, but it looks quite neat in place. But that's like anything else, isn't it? The underneath can be as rough as you like, as long as the form is fine. The function underneath can be pretty ratty, can't it? Yeah.
Very true. I was about to miss a major question. Mixing in mono, what do you make of it?
It's still important. Still important, since people seem intent on listening to music on any kind of phone, which I believe should be punishable by a prison sentence. I'm not talking about on earbuds. I'm talking like, listen to my new, and what's this about beats? Listen to my beats. What's a beats? I don't know. Anyway, anybody who insists on listening to music on the phone, you deserve to get tinnitus as far as I'm concerned. So don't do it. But one of the things that they exhibit is really crap stereo implementation. So any music that I mix, since I'm a mixing engineer, has to be compatible with stuff like that, as well as computer speakers. I've got a pair over here, as well as proper studio monitors. I've got over here multiple pairs of headphones. So yes, I still mix with mono compatibility in mind, especially narrowing the low frequencies. And for 10 years, it probably hasn't mattered. But loads of people are releasing on vinyl now. And it's critical with vinyl that you don't have too much stereo information on low frequency sounds. And you probably know the answer to this, Dal, but for those of you who might be interested, if you imagine the groove in a record, it's like a valley. It's like this, right? Yeah. And when it was mono, it would go up and down like this, or it would go around like this. That was what was mono. And then some bright spark said, we could encode 2 tracks and have stereo music on records. Well, how are you going to do that? It went, because we're going to do this and that and that, and we're going to shape the groove. So, okay, everybody goes, yeah, that's a great idea. So when we have a bass drum in the middle, it's going to go up and down like that, right? That's fine. And then somebody else says, but I'm going to put my bass guitar all on one side and my bass drum all on the other side. Now, there's your bass drum, and then your bass guitar's going all this. And the result is that when you get to the cutting engineer, they're going to go, this is a load of nonsense. I can't cut this record loud. I've got to cut it really little because it's all over the place. So if you want to cut a loud record on vinyl, you have to have the mono end at the bass end, because otherwise it will just literally throw your needle out the groove. So I'd say mono is really important again now, whereas it hasn't been, because on CD, the CD didn't give a toss. It was a lazy. It was going, 2, 1, 0, whatever it is. You could put your bass over here. You could put your bass drum over there. Your CD and your speakers wouldn't care. But now we're working to vinyl again. It's important to bring those bass frequencies back into mono. And anything that's out of phase, anything where one speaker's going in when the other one's coming out, is going to throw your needle sideways. So mixing with good phase correlation and not too wide in the low frequencies, as important now as it was in the 1950s.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think what I've done as well, which is quite interesting as of late, is I've managed to download a trial version of SonarWorks reference ID. Now, what this thing would do is, like, I think you already know, but it'll flatten the curve of your headphones.
Oh yeah.
In an emergent, well, what it is, you can spend 299 euros and you get a microphone with it to help calibrate the room. So when I next get my my pittance in, I'm going to basically put it towards that and live on lentils for the rest of the month. But I will literally, it'll EQ correct. So let's say it'll look at the EQ curve for some Sennheiser HD 600s or 650s, and they will do a counter curve to try and flatten that. Now, I think that's, for me, hoping, I'm right at the bottom end of mixing, like right at the bottom end, like, a hand coming out the drain saying, "You got a quid, mate." But whereas you're like in the Bentley, like going ha 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 sort of thing.
Well, my studio isn't a Bentley studio. It's a very ordinary setup. It's not an expensive setup. It's not an acoustically controlled environment, although it is quite a good acoustic environment. The EQ correction you refer to, it works. It works very well, but it only corrects one element of the sound generation in your studio. If you haven't got a well set up pair of studio monitors and you're working on headphones, it's one of the things that headphones can get very wrong, especially with your Dr. J's, which are great if you want to have a big deep bass response, but accurate they ain't. So it would take some of the inaccuracy out. But that's only one element. You've got other things going on. You've got the phase relationship. You've got the spatial relationship. If you have ordinary headphones on, the sound goes across your head in a line in the middle of your head, and that's not what we perceive on speakers. So you get a whole different thing. You've got to absorb that. And there's a lot of talk about having to have a triangular shape between the sweet spot on your monitors. That's not 100% true either, because as somebody pointed out in an article I read the other day, if you set it up as an equilateral triangle on the speakers now, and you look at your speakers, that's not where your ears are they? No. Your ears are over here. So unless you've got ears on your eyes, you haven't got it right. So that whole equilateral thing isn't quite true either. What you do want is a room that is non-square, but fairly symmetrical. Yeah. You preferably want a ceiling which is in parallel with your floor. Now, this might sound cretinously simple, but what you're doing is any studio, and especially small rooms, that has parallel surfaces like that's creating nodes, right? And that means that there's certain frequencies which bounce back and forth, and you can't get rid of them in small square rooms. You can EQ them out, but it's not great. It's kind of, it will get you part way. But you have a problem. What you've got to do is dissipate them. Behind me, I've got a screen which dissipates. My two walls back to front aren't quite parallel. My two side walls aren't quite parallel. And although you can't see it, well, maybe you can if I tip you back, I'm in a pitched ceiling. Wow. So any sound that goes upwards from my speakers, instead of coming straight back down, it bounces off at 90 degrees. And therefore, any sound from here goes up there, across there, then down here, and then back here. And so I don't have that vertical bounce that most studios have. So that puts me in a much better place. And if you've got a chance to do something like that, that's much better than EQing headphones. But if you've got, a situation where your other half or your girlfriend or something doesn't like the racket coming out of your bedroom, whatever it might be, then working on headphones is great, and EQ monitoring of headphones is quite useful too. I wanted to bring something into view here. Have you come across this?
Oh my, what? Oh my God! But the reason why I can't use that is because I suffer with electromagnetic hypersensitivity.
Right,
and I get really bad headaches. But you're so lucky.
Well, these work quite well. These aren't the best headphones. These were all I could afford at the time. These are Shure SRH 440s, and the reason I bought these is because the EQ curve that Waves includes for these headphones. But there's MD, Sony MD 5065s, whatever they are, for example, or others. But what this does, guys and girls, is this is a little Bluetooth thing on the top, which obviously Dave can't use. But what this does is it tells the computer exactly where my headphones are in the room.
Wow.
So if I'm listening to something, which I'm used to listening to on speakers, I can turn my speakers off. I can tell the Waves NX system what it is I'm listening on, which in this case is Sony SRH 440s. And then the clever Bluetooth thing, when I turn my head to look at the left speaker, it does something monstrously clever and really diabolical in that the image that I'm listening to doesn't move. And if I turn my headphones to the right-hand side, the image doesn't move. So what Waves have done in this case is they've calculated what it would sound like had I moved my head relative to speakers. Now, the huge thing about this is that if you're in a hotel room,
yes,
or you've got some quite decent rig, it might be a brilliant DAW like Cubase or Logic or whatever, any of the others, but you can't listen on speakers, this gets you a very long way to be able to mix as if you were on speakers. Because as I move backwards in the room, so the sound gets more distant. As I get closer to the speakers, it gets closer. If I turn right round the other way, it sounds like it's coming out from behind me. So, and this was cheap. It was cheap technology, you know, relatively. So I've played quite a lot with this. And the reason I like it is, now to completely reverse what I've said.
Yeah.
The reason I like it is nothing to do with any of that clever stuff. What I use it for is in the mornings when you're stressed and you're having a complicated time and you can't focus and somebody is using a hammer action drill on the road and you want the window open but the buses keep going past, all those imperfections. And working on monitors isn't working out for you. You can't concentrate. I put these on. I switch off my speakers. I set them up so they move. And if I move over to my keyboard zone, which is over to my right here, the sound is still over my left shoulder. And after about 10, 15 minutes, some funny things start to happen. Firstly, I forget I'm wearing them because the sound doesn't go through the middle. It goes round as you'd expect it to. It doesn't go through the middle. And furthermore, you don't hear, because they're fully closed headphones, you don't hear much from the outside world. And so you end up getting into your own world of sound and placement and reverb and vocals and the message that you're trying to get to on the music. And so I would never trust these to mix anything finally. But whilst I'm trying to concentrate, they're brilliant. Any headphones really help. But regular headphones, after a while, they start to bug you because you've got this line going through the centre of your head and everything is like on a tube train between the two. Yeah. Whereas when you can wear this, or indeed if you can mix in a room where there's 3D space, you can listen to your mix and then you can kick back and go, yeah, but does the bass really want to sound that loud? On regular headphones, that sound moves with you. Once you're on this system, I don't work for Waves, by the way. Once you're on this system, when you kick back, the sound changes as if you've moved back from the speakers. And so I use it as a concentration aid and a way of making me smile when I'm pissed off at the world, stressed with everything. Having a wonderful piece of kit like that in the room makes me feel very lucky. And so I put them on for an hour and I can work perfectly happy, even though I wouldn't possibly necessarily trust myself to mix something finally on them. If it's the best you've got, then it's good enough. But I can certainly get on and place things, because making music is not necessarily about having everything in the foreground. You want stuff to sit back and for people to notice the second time and third time they listen. If it's all on the surface, a consumer gets through it in one or two listens. If you have a sense of space and drama and detail and jokes, I often have jokes going on in my musical mixes that people go, where did that come from? Or why is that doing that? And asking those questions, they make people keen to listen to what you've recorded more and more times. Yeah. And isn't that what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day? Is exactly that, so that people go, I don't know why, but I just love that song. There's something about it. And you just don't really know why it is. It's because you keep hearing new things in it to like, and you become entranced with it. When it's all right in front of you saying, have this, it's done and dusted like a 3-minute coffee. It's not to be savoured, you know.
On that note, Pete, have you experimented with like different tunings, such as A equals 432, A equals 444?
I try not to. I haven't got perfect pitch. Some stretch tunings I quite like. There's some of the North African stuff I don't mind. being a bit stretched. But other things just grate on me. Bagpipes grate terribly on me. The Scottish tuning bagpipes, I can't stomach them. I'm sorry to all the Scottish people who love them, but they just hurt me. And the reason is this: I haven't got perfect pitch, but I've got very good relative pitch.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
Which means that once I've started my day, I pretty much know what key anything music coming at me is in, because I kind of know where I am with it. And also the way guitars and keyboards sound is different when the relationships are different. So I can listen to something and go, well, it sounds like a C to me. And I'm normally right. Not always, but because B is brasher and D is just a bit sweeter and E flat's sweeter still. So I kind of get a hoarse sense for where I am. And also there was a thing in the 70s where they would tighten up music by speeding it up, and they would do it by making the reels go round faster. And that music was therefore slightly off key. And I often used to listen to stuff and I'd go, I really don't like this. And I'd listen it back on the studio and I'd play the keyboards and go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And I'd find that it's sort of somewhere in the crack between C and C sharp, and that it would irritate me. So I tend to generally stick with concert A440. I can stomach A442. I haven't got good enough ears to hear the difference in that. But when you go to A32, that's on the edge of going, oh no, that's not quite right for me. And so I tend to stick with concert tuning for the most part.
Brilliant. Pete, may I make a suggestion? Like I know, like I'm talking to Yoda here, right? That no, it's true.
But not as green and not as old, hopefully.
No.
But you're right, I'm not much taller.
No, but in terms of ability, knowledge, experience, knowing what you're doing, you're just a don. Simple as. May I suggest 150 quid, right? This bit of kit over here, and this is from somebody suffering. This is a electromagnetic meter.
Okay.
And I think us being, me being an amateur engineer and you being a pro, I think we're around more gear than. I'm not saying we're around more electricity, more electricity than a Sparky or anything, but it's just good to be safe in your environment and to know what lets off the most. I can't use the MacBook Pro unless I use an external wired keyboard. So, and like what happens, my hands actually burn. I can't use mobile phones. Everything's done with a wired landline or a Skype line. And I've had to live a really, really weird way. Like this room that I'm in now, believe it or not, Pete, it's like a Faraday cage that paints on the wall.
Have you tried wearing aluminium foil?
No, because if I try, the missus will try and put a jacket potato in there.
Put you in the microwave. That's not going to work, is it?
It's true, but it's just living with this condition. I think
what an unusual condition.
It's horrible. I had an interview recently with Copper Magazine based in Boulder, Colorado. It's like for audio files and stuff, and they had to interview me about the condition. But it's just working in the world of radio and radiation when I can't handle radiation. It's pretty pretty interesting. And let's move on to. I was watching this thing on YouTube the other day. It's like 1 a.m, and I was saying I was working in the studio. It was late, and I was messaging the missus like, Claire, blah 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 blah, and she's talking about motorhomes, and I go, there's this Volvo motorhome, right? And it's like a truck. It's like a truck, like a lorry, and it's by RC. But at the back of it opens up, and it's got an aerial atom car that comes out of the back of it. And I thought, wouldn't that be the dream to have a motorhome and travel Europe? So, tell me about motorhoming, man.
Oh, well, you see, yes, we do motorhome. We don't have anything like as lavish as that. We stretch to a pair of electric bikes in the back. That's as far as we've gone. Never mind a car in the back, but electric bikes. My wife and I, we happened to buy a motorhome in 2007. And we bought it because we wanted to be able to travel back and forth between Spain and England. And one of the things we wanted to travel back for was robot bashes and do's. We'd do 3 or 4 days at the NEC, or we, go and do other competitions and stuff. And so, you can't fly robots very easily. You've got the LiPo batteries to consider. You've got the weight and scale.
Yeah.
And so the motorhome became our go-to vehicle to move us and robots about. And so we started to motorhome with that as a primary purpose. And we would drive up from Spain to the UK and do a robot show, let's say convention. And then we would maybe drive from UK to Germany and do another one because they're big in Europe. And then you maybe drive back, or you drive down through France and stuff. And now that was when the kids were small, but they've grown up now. But we've still got the same motorhome now. We've had it since 2007. So what's that? Coming up 14 years. That's right. And although the kids have grown and flown, my wife and I like to travel around it. It's a great de-stressor. We have our motorhome. We park where we fancy, more or less. We sometimes use campsites, but more often than not, we don't. We park it up, lock it up, and saunter off on our electric bikes. And it's a lovely hobby and a lovely way to de-stress in between bouts of work, And that's what you caught me doing. I came back from a long week away last night. So I do that. That's a sort of a hobby, and that takes a bit of maintenance and all that stuff. And I like fixing things. So, and I love driving. It also puts me in mind for those years when I was touring as a band member. We were always hammering over Europe in a transit van, that sort of thing. So it puts me back in that mindset as well. It's quite a big thing. It's 7.5 meters long. So you drive it like a small lorry. Yeah. So you have to be aware of it, at all times. And I like a long drive, a relatively sedate drive. As it reminds me of those lovely years I spent touring with bands and all the wonderful people and that whole thing. It puts me into that, and so I enjoy it on every level.
Beautiful. Well, hopefully, if we ever get the money, we'll save up and we will get a. I don't know about 600
bit pricey.
Yeah.
They're a bit pricey at the moment because lots of people have decided that staycationing and stuff is a good idea. So motorhomes as second-hand things are a hot property at the moment, but we're not planning on selling anytime soon. So.
Brilliant. What does the future hold for Pete Ware?
Well, if it's as predictable as the past, I haven't got a clue. It could be anything. I don't really know. I've just got a cup of coffee coming in. One sec.
It's all right. Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
See that? Perks of the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't get that on radio, though.
No. Do I know what's coming? I think I'm doing a little bit less than I used to. That's partly more people are able to do their own stuff. The need for engineering and mixing and mastering is reduced. But partly because I am knocking on in years, having done it for a long time. But I plan to carry on more or less as I am, just maybe a little bit steadier pace, bit more time for motorhoming, bit more time for robotics and all that sort of stuff. But more or less more of the same. I'll be getting out the box, I think, pretty soon with a couple of synths, more for the joy than anything else. And I hope to continue for a few years yet. If my hearing and perception, it's not really hearing, perception of sound holds good for a bit, then I'll carry on. If I start to feel it gets too difficult, then I'll stop, But so hopefully more of the same, but a bit slower will be what comes next.
Brilliant. Pete, is there anything I haven't asked you but I should ask you?
No, I think we've more or less covered it, haven't we? I mean, if you are a youngster, mind your ears. It's important, or else I wouldn't say it. It's important. Don't thrash your ears, because although I didn't get tinnitus as a result of industrial hearing loss, which is what loud monitoring will do, you might think you're getting a good result when you listen to stuff loud, but what you're actually doing is you're making yourself react to a chemical injection when you listen to music loud. It makes you feel good, but it doesn't make you perceive well. So if you want to be an engineer, turn it down. I would say that that's an important message. Other than that, believe in yourself, have fun, whether it's music or technology or robots or motorhomes or other things completely different, or indeed careers in radio. Don't be boxed in by being told that you have to study the arts or the sciences or any of that nonsense. Believe in what you can do, and I'll cap it by saying, whatever you do, enjoy it. And that's kind of encapsulated what we've been saying the last hour or two. Is having fun. It's what life's all about. It doesn't matter if you fail miserably, as long as you've spent most of your time on your back laughing. That's a great success in my book.
That's deep. Where can people get hold of you if they want to commission your talent and ability for mix and mastering work?
Well, I am around. I do have a Facebook presence, but I normally like to just leave it fairly open so that if people are determined enough, they can find me easily enough. On social media, you can find anybody. Or you won't go very far in the Bhangra community before somebody goes, oh, yeah, I know that guy. So that's relatively easy. I'm fairly easy to find. And I'm a bit choosy about what I do. So try and present me with good stuff if you can. But if you're saying, look, I'm trying to make this, it's not working for me, do you think it's worth pursuing? What I will say is I will always give you an honest answer. You may not be the answer you want to hear, but I'll give you my honest opinion. So, yeah, I can be found. Not too difficult to find. And I'm, not too crazy pricey either, because people have to work. I just have to work. Knowing that I've done this for a long time doesn't put money in the bank. Yeah. I have to work like everybody else does. So, yeah, it's all out there if you want it.
From the bottom of my, I was about to say heart. Do I have one? We're working in the world of radio. I do have one working in the world of...
Of course you do, yeah. There was even a radio station named after it, isn't it?
It's true, heart. Yeah, you're right. But
you're full of heart. That's plain from the first words we uttered.
It's true. Thank you. But listen, I want to say thank you. Just thank you for putting up with me first, right? No one can. I'm going to be the guy.
I suggest you bleep that bit out. But that's risky, man. Risky.
But thank you.
I think you've got a great approach. I love it. I love it. It's funny, not too pure.
Yeah.
But obviously, you're coming from a place of love and positivity, and that's much more important.
Oh man, thank you. I'm just very, very grateful, and thank you for putting up with the fact that we're, a whole hour of your. I notice you're looking after your health as well. You haven't actually got any biscuits with your coffee.
Yeah, well, actually, I probably have. Yes. Yeah, they've been in a bit, but I have got some custard creams down there for emergencies. But yeah,
brilliant. And one more thing I got to say, I'm going to send out a salute to Mike Senior, because I think I'll send this video interview over to Mike Senior, who writes for Sound and Sound as well. So, because I'm a big fan of Mike Senior.
I'm a big fan of those magazines, both online and the originals. People like that, and Paul White. And I didn't used to know one of the guys, I've forgotten his name for a minute, who used to write for Sound on Sound.
Martin Walker.
Lovely people, very, very genuine and very well organised. They have to do these reviews and be measured about things. They have to be organised in what they're saying, and they have to understand the gear. It was really important. It was much, much better learning than anything else. If you can't actually be doing this, magazines like that were huge for me. And of course, if you want to do this, there's a lot of nonsense on YouTube too, but there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube and Facebook groups and stuff. But don't always believe everything that people say. Sometimes a more direct approach. So if you've got an audio problem, throwing more gear at it doesn't necessarily solve it. Maybe you've got too much gear. Maybe just clearing the signal path out and getting more direct. There's nothing more beautiful than a recording of a vocal that has nothing done to it. Wow. Everything you do to it takes something away. You can double track it, and in the moment you go, it sounds great. But in that double tracking, you've messed up the image. You've messed up what's being said. So while you're going, oh, it's all phasey and lovely, you're throwing a message in the bin. Yeah. If it should be a single voice, then let it be single. Let it be loud and proud. Don't muss it up with effects. Minimalism. That's I'd say.
Wow. Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honour having you on my humble show. And to have such a legend and someone with a big heart, golden ears, warm, you know, gave me the time of day as a small fry. I'm honoured. Just want to say thank you.
No, you're very welcome, and I don't think anybody's small fry. I think we're all equally important. I think that's more the message I would give. So it's been a great pleasure. If anybody listens to this, thanks for listening to me witter on. You know.
Nah, man, there's so many golden nuggets there, and I'm definitely listening hard. Well, turning down the volume as well.
Well, you could edit all this down into about 30 seconds of anything useful, and the rest of it is just joyful nonsense, and that's worth it too, isn't it?
Dude, you're the best. God bless you, Pete.
God bless you too. Take care of yourself. We'll speak again at some point in the future, no doubt.
Most definitely,
and,
man.